Are you cheating? I'll marry your uncle and be your aunt. After 1 year of marriage, my husband loved me in every way before marriage, but he hated me after marriage. It was not until his lover called me and challenged me, "Don't be a nagging woman, or you will lose your position," that I knew he had cheated on me, and the one he cheated on me with was the internet celebrity who bullied me back then. I divorced him decisively, but he turned around and married the internet celebrity. His uncle stood behind me and said, "I have an idea for you, find a more powerful man to marry and take revenge on them." Chapter 1: Men are different before and after marriage. I was thinking, are most men really so different before and after marriage? Yang Zhan followed a woman on the Douyin app. She was a voluptuous and stunning woman, with a powerful chest and a perky, high-raised backside. The provocative poses she posted made a person's blood rush just by glancing at them. He used to look down on women like this. I suppressed the bitterness in my heart and chuckled. So, this is your type, huh? Do you really enjoy spying on people? A cold reprimanding voice came from beside me. I looked up at the man standing next to me. He was tall and imposing, his appearance sharp and aggressive. His brows and eyes held an innate sharpness, and he exuded a cold, detached aura. He was wearing a casual, comfortable cotton silk pajama set, yet it only accentuated his restrained and aloof demeanor. Without a word, he snatched my phone and moved to the other side of the bed, keeping a stranger's distance from me. I swallowed the pain and said with difficulty, "So, you're into Douyin?" "Who asked that woman?" "Mind your own business." His 3 cold words were full of indifference. As a woman confined at home with no job, no money, and no family support, I really didn't have the confidence to question him. I bitterly smiled and, as I lay down, my arm accidentally brushed against him. He quickly shifted away, distancing himself further as if I, his wife, were some kind of filthy trash. It was almost laughable that we hadn't had any physical intimacy at all since we got married. Before the wedding, he respected me and never touched me. On the wedding day, he left me alone in an empty room. After we married, I tried everything: white stockings, black stockings, lace lingerie, JK uniforms, nurse costumes, dancer outfits, but he still remained unmoved, even insulting me. "Are you really that desperate?" Before marriage, he was obsessive and doting, but after we married, he became cold and distant. The contrast was unbearable for me. So, when he least expected it, I straddled him, leaning close, my slender fingers tracing his neck as I slowly moved down, attempting to explore further. The man beneath me was breathing heavily, his heartbeat quickening, his body taut, and something firm and hard pressed against me. This was enough to prove he didn't have sexual dysfunction. Just as I expected, he suppressed his desires, grabbing my restless hands with one forceful motion, pushing me away violently. His low, angry voice rang through the room, "Jing Shu, what the hell are you doing? Do you really just want to sleep with any man?" His shout made me freeze in place, the blood draining from my face. He had always been gentle and considerate, never once raising his voice at me, let alone shouting. I sat there awkwardly, struggling to hold back the bitterness in my heart, my voice trembling. "But we're married. Isn't it normal for a married couple to have a physical relationship? We've been married for a whole year." He sneered. I thought of the woman he was following on Douyin, and I gave a self-deprecating laugh. Men's sexual fantasies are always big, right? Is it because I'm not big enough? Can't turn you on. I have a good figure, a beautiful silhouette, and a slim waist, but my chest and hips are not as bold as that woman's. His eyes darkened, his throat moving with a sensual curve. He looked at me with burning desire. Suddenly, he leaned forward and pressed me down onto the soft bed. He pinned my wrists above my head, his eyes narrowing as he stared at me. "So, you want to do it that badly?" I smiled seductively. "Yes." He asked, "How badly do you want it?" I gazed up into his eyes, my voice sweet and syrupy. "I want to have a baby with you." He curled his lips into a smile, his voice low and alluring. "All right, tonight, husband will fulfill your wish." With that, he lowered his head and bit open the left side of my waist, where a butterfly knot tied my sash. The soft silk ribbon fell to one side. My body was on fire, and I couldn't help but shiver. He chuckled, "Already this impatient?" The hormones radiating from him clouded my mind, and I felt weak, almost suffocating. After all, this kind of intimacy was something we had never shared before. I held my breath. I desperately wanted to be his woman, but at this moment, I couldn't bear to look at him because I was afraid of seeing humiliation and mockery. Just as he continued biting the right side of my robe, his phone suddenly rang. The passion in his eyes disappeared in an instant. Without hesitation, he sat up, went to the wardrobe, and answered the call. When he came back out, he had changed into a formal suit, a family heirloom made silk wool suit, black vertical stripes, wide lapels, a pointed collar shirt, and empire pins, finished off with Italian Silvano Lattanzi shoes. He knew how to dress, and with his natural good looks, no matter where he stood, he was always a standout, radiant and shining. Countless elite young women had pursued him, but he had been deeply affectionate and gentle with me, showing his love and devotion in such a way that I had fallen hopelessly in love. After marriage, though, it seemed like he had become a completely different person. I knew he was about to leave. I clenched my fists and said, "There are only 5 minutes left. It's our anniversary today." I added eagerly, with a hint of desperation in my tone, "You said you'd spend every holiday with me." He seem to have any intention of staying. He opened the door and said coldly, "Go to sleep early. I have something to do." "Yang Zhan, are you sure you're leaving?" I raised my voice, my eyes shimmering with anger and tears. He walked out without looking back, throwing over his shoulder, "I'll get you a gift tomorrow." The door slammed shut. It felt like thousands of tiny needles pricked into my eyes. The pain was unbearable. I fought back my tears and shouted at the closed door, "Are you going to meet that woman? Your relationship with her isn't normal, is it?" There was only a brief pause in his footsteps outside. I collapsed onto the bed, overwhelmed by the crushing pain, unable to hold back anymore, and I sobbed loudly. When I was 18, I went to university and encountered him after he had been in a car accident. I saved him from a car that was about to explode. From that moment on, he started pursuing me fervently. I rejected him, but he persisted, and after he saved me once, I was moved. He was the one who pursued me first, who fell in love with me first, yet it was him who became distant and cold in the end. It was laughable that I didn't even know why. He didn't have a white moonlight figure in his life. Was it because of that woman he followed on Douyin? Then, in the dead of night, his phone rang again. A woman's voice came from the other end of the line, sharp and provocative. "Can you stop making Yang Zhan angry? You should know your place as a housewife. Do your chores and mind your own business. Don't be a whiny wife. Be careful, your position as Mrs. Yang won't last long." I felt like I had fallen into an ice-cold abyss. A chill ran through my body, my skin shivering as my voice trembled. "Who are you? Why do you have his phone?" The woman on the other end sneered, her voice sharp with mockery. "Who do you think I am? Your husband has been following me for a year. Didn't you know? Typical of a full-time housewife to be clueless. Don't waste my time." He coming out of the shower. Goodbye. Chapter 2, no longer the dignity-less daughter-in-law. Yang Zhan, as the president of a multinational corporation, is worth a fortune, and countless women want to climb into his bed. So, I kept my composure and found the account of the woman I had seen earlier. Her name was Bo Mayer. She was a fitness influencer with over 5 million followers. Something about her seemed familiar, though I can't quite place it. Maybe it was because of her surgically altered face. Each of her videos received hundreds of thousands of likes, and the comment sections were filled with compliments about her body and looks. Many people also speculated about the identity of the person she was following, as she had set her profile to private. I searched through every video, looking for clues, and finally, in a video she posted a year ago, I found a familiar figure in the background. Bo Mayer was playing golf at a top-tier club abroad with Jing Yu, the most famous socialite in Yanjing. Not far behind them stood a tall, slender figure. I immediately recognized it. Yang Zhan. The video was posted the afternoon of the day I registered my marriage to him. The day before, he had suddenly told me to cancel the wedding and only register for the marriage because he had urgent business abroad. So, there was no wedding, and he never brought it up again. 4 years of love had been like heaven, but 1 year of marriage had felt like hell. Just a joke, laughing at others and hurting myself in the process. That night, I couldn't sleep. I alternated between collapsing and healing, going through the same cycle repeatedly. This is how the adult world works, crumbling and healing at the same time. By the time the sky started to lighten, I had made up my mind. I decided to divorce him. I looked at the dress I had bought for our wedding anniversary today. It was luxurious, exquisite, and expensive. I had once loved it, but now it felt like an eyesore. So, I tore it apart. Disgusting wedding anniversary. I changed into the clothes I had bought for myself before the wedding, grabbed my phone and some personal documents, and decided to leave without taking anything else. Everything else had been bought by Yang Zhan. At that moment, I heard Mrs. Cow, the maid, knocking on the door loudly. "Why are you still in bed? Madam has returned. She wants some bird's nest soup and black truffle brie cheese," she shouted. Then, in a voice I could still hear, she muttered, "Lazy as hell. Can't even get up when Madam's back. Does she think she's a rich wife? She doesn't even know who treats her well in this house." Today was my mother-in-law's return from her world tour. I had carefully taken care of her because I loved Yang Zhan. His mother was part of the package, and I had to serve her. The maid spoke this way, without any hesitation or respect, simply because my mother-in-law gave her the confidence. Of course, Yang Zhan's silence also played a part. My mother-in-law had once looked down on me for being an orphan, even though I was adopted. To her, I was just a nouveau riche. She scorned me for not attending a prestigious university and for having a piano tuner career, which she thought was beneath her. She had bluntly told me, "My son is completely bewitched by you. Even if you marry into the Yang family, you're just a wild phoenix, no way you could ever stand on the same stage as a true noble. Fortunately, not many people know he married you. Otherwise, we'd all be the laughingstock. Don't go out and embarrass the Yang family. You have no ability and can't contribute to Yang Zhan's business, so just stay home and be a full-time wife." I asked Yang Zhan what he thought. He replied, "Do as mom says." So, I gave up my career as a piano tuner and worked tirelessly every day from morning till night, with no rest. All I received was disdain from my mother-in-law. Mrs. Cow knocked on the door again, harder this time. I opened it. She scolded, "Why are you still in bed? Do you think you're the rich wife now?" She then sneered, "Even your husband doesn't care about you." Slap. I raised my hand and slapped Mrs. Cow across the face. She held her face in disbelief, her eyes wide, probably wondering why the usually submissive woman in front of her had dared to strike her. I pushed her aside, went downstairs, and made my way to the kitchen. I heard her mocking me behind my back, "What can you do? Go make breakfast for Madam. Just wait and see. When Madam starts yelling at you, I'll see if you dare to say anything." I spent half an hour in the kitchen, and when I came out, Li Kaiman, my mother-in-law, was sitting elegantly at one end of the dining table, holding a large, aggressive Rottweiler. Li Kaiman glared at me with anger in her eyes and scolded, "You slapped her?" I walked over with breakfast in hand and nodded. She was fuming, her anger boiling over. "What? You've been living here for so long, and you've forgotten your place. You're now teaching the servants a lesson." I replied, "What? Can't I hit a barking dog?" Li Kaiman scoffed, "Even a dog should know its master." I smirked, "If the master can't control the dog and it's biting everyone, why can't I slap it?" Li Kaiman turned red with rage. I didn't respond to her. Instead of serving her breakfast like I used to, lowly and respectfully I sat across from her and started eating. I hadn't eaten in over a day and was starving. The bird's nest soup and black truffle brie cheese tasted wonderful, and she never allowed me to have them before. Seeing me so calmly eating made her even angrier. She slammed her hand on the table and shouted, "Jing Shu, what do you think you're doing?" I continued eating quickly, saying, "Eating." She stood up abruptly, her face, which had been finely made up, now twisted with fury. "Eating? Are you out of your mind? No wonder my son doesn't care about you. He must regret marrying you now." Mrs. Cow added from the side, "She's really not worthy of Mr. Yang." Their words didn't faze me. I continued eating, savoring the expensive, delicious breakfast. In the past, at this time, I would have been standing beside Li Kaiman, serving her, bending over backward like a dignity-less rich wife. Li Kaiman's face turned pale with fury. She suddenly gave a cold laugh and petted the Rottweiler. "You really think my son loves you that much? The day before your wedding, he suddenly had an epiphany and listened to me. He decided not to marry you." She rolled her eyes and, with added venom, said, "If it wasn't for that day when his uncle showed up with a 1 billion investment as a wedding gift, you wouldn't have stepped foot in the Yang family's door. Why did my son cancel their wedding? Why did he only register the marriage? Didn't you think about it? Suddenly, it all clicked in my mind. Around that time, Yang Zhan's corporate strategy failed, which caused a funding crisis. He was under immense pressure. I had indeed seen his uncle at the Yang family's house the day before their wedding. Yang Zhan never really wanted to marry me. Maybe the whole Disney proposal and fireworks display had just been for fun, but I had taken it seriously. Bitterly, I chewed and swallowed quickly, even using my hands to shove food into my mouth, eating as if I were starving. Li Kaiman screamed, "You wretched woman, eating like a pig. This is my breakfast. Do you think you deserve it?" I stopped, spat out the food into the plate, and then stuck my finger down my throat. With a gag, all the food I had just eaten came back up. I pushed the plate forward, and it slid perfectly in front of Li Kaiman. I picked up a napkin elegantly to wipe my fingers, then looked at her sideways, curling my lips into a smile. "You want it? Should have asked sooner. Here, it's all yours." Chapter 3, knocked down by a dog and rolled down the stairs. Li Tsaima was so disgusted she gagged, trembling with rage. "You're disgusting. I knew it. People with no parents are always this uncultured and ill-mannered." I picked up a glass of water from the side and rinsed my mouth, then spat the water toward her. Unfortunately, the table was too long, and only a few drops landed on her. I said, "Did you forget? The first time I stepped into the Yang family house, you treated me the same way. How is it that people with parents like you are even more uncultured and ill-mannered than me?" She didn't expect me, the usually meek and easily bullied one, to act this wildly. She shouted, "How dare you say that? Do you want to kill me with your words?" Her hysterical outburst looked nothing like the graceful and dignified woman she claimed to be. I smiled and responded lazily, "Yes, I do want to kill you, ideally by making you so mad you get breast hyperplasia, breast tumors, breast nodules, and breast cancer." She went ballistic, ordering Aunt Cow to slap me and yelling, "Look at that filthy mouth of hers. She's cursing me to death. Someone, shut that mouth of hers." Aunt Cow, looking as fierce as a demon, stepped forward. Before she could raise her hand, I grabbed the water glass from the table and smashed it against her head. The loud crash was followed by her miserable scream. I bent down, picked up a shard, and smiled as I looked at her calmly. "Come on then." For years, this mother-in-law had been criticizing and attacking me without cause, and Aunt Cow had been mocking me, using her backing from my mother-in-law. Because I loved Yang Zhan, I had endured it. But now that this dog of a man had cheated on me, why should I still tolerate this? Aunt Cow was crying uncontrollably, and Li Tsaima was stunned, her Rottweiler in her arms barking fiercely at me. When she snapped out of it, she shouted at me, "Jing Shu! You crazy woman! Do you believe I'll have my son divorce you right now? I'll have you thrown out of the Yang family." I smiled indifferently, "Thanks for passing on the message. I'll prepare the divorce papers." With that, I turned and walked out the door without looking back. It was raining outside, the raindrops falling in a fine mist, the ground becoming wet. I stood on the steps, took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, felt a sense of relief. Suddenly, behind me, I heard the Rottweiler's frantic barking. I turned around, and before I could react, the dog charged at me, slamming into my body. I was caught off guard and was knocked down, tumbling down the stairs. I lay there in a messy heap, my face drenched, unable to tell whether it was cold rainwater or blood. The pain from multiple impacts made me nearly lose consciousness. I vaguely heard the sound of a door closing. I don't know how long I lay there, but when I began to regain some strength, I grabbed my phone and, with trembling hands, dialed Yang Zhan's number. With all the strength I could muster, I said, "Yang Zhan, hurry back and take me to the hospital." His voice came through cold and impatient as always. "Can't you go by yourself? I've told you, don't call me unless it's an emergency. I'm not as idle as you." The call was abruptly cut off. A wave of despair and hopelessness washed over me. At that moment, the physical pain seemed almost insignificant. Biting my lip, I mustered all my strength and slowly got up from the ground. I tried to dial 120, but my phone had died. This was a gated villa community, and aside from private cars, there were no other vehicles around. I stumbled to the roadside, hoping to find a kind-hearted soul who would take me to the hospital. Just then, I spotted a car parked by the road. My vision was blurry, and I tried to call out for help, but dizziness overtook me, and I collapsed onto the ground. In my hazy state, it seemed like a tall man rushed over, picked me up and covered my forehead with his hand. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a spacious and comfortable hospital room. Aside from feeling sore all over, my head was wrapped up, and there was a slight stinging pain along with a fever. My phone had been thoughtfully charged. I thought to myself how lucky I was to have been saved by a kind person and resolved to thank him properly. Just then, there was a knock on the door. I croaked, "Come in." The door opened, and two men with distinguished appearances walked in. One was wearing a white coat, exuding an elegant and noble aura, and the other was in a grey suit, looking gentle and refined. If the one in the white coat was the doctor, then the other man was the one who had saved me. I smiled warmly. "You're the one who brought me to the hospital, right? Thank you so much." The doctor stepped forward, his face smiling. "No need to thank me. Good deeds are always rewarded." I blinked, taken aback by his words. He took a few steps to my bedside, his voice warm and soothing. "Miss Jing, you have a mild concussion, several external bruises, and a cold from the rain. The injuries are not severe, but you're very weak, so I suggest staying in the hospital for a few days of rest. I'm the attending physician here, my name is Yi Heng, and I'm also the one who saved you." I thanked him again. "Thank you, Dr. Yi." Suddenly, his handsome face leaned closer, as if he were scrutinizing me. At that moment, the other man, who looked mild-mannered, pushed Dr. Yi aside and blocked his gaze, smiling broadly at me. "Miss Jing, I'm the one who saved you. He's just a passenger. By the way, my name is Chen Ci. I was just passing by when I happened to see you." He didn't ask about the incident but continued to smile at me with warmth and friendliness. "Are you hungry? I went out and got some food for you. I hope it suits your taste. You need to eat more, you're so thin for a young girl, and you look malnourished, with severe anemia." I looked at the bags of food in his hands. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with a kind and approachable demeanor, giving off the feeling of a warm and caring older man. I was deeply moved and quickly said, "Thank you so much for bringing me to the hospital and getting me food. How much was it? I'll transfer you the money now." He placed the food on the coffee table and waved his hand. "No need, it wasn't expensive." I insisted, "I have to pay you. You saved my life, I'm truly grateful. I can't let you spend your money." At that moment, Dr. Yi spoke up, "If you really want to thank us, you can treat us to a meal." I looked at him, and our eyes met. He was smiling softly, his gaze warm like a spring breeze. Chen Ci shot him a sharp glance, blocking his gaze again. "Yes, if you want, you can treat us to a meal sometime. But we're usually very busy, so we'll decide the time." It was clear they were good friends. I nodded in agreement. "Sure, let us exchange contact info. When you're free, just give me a call." Dr. Yi handed me his phone, letting me scan his QR code. Chen Ci shoved him aside with a look of disdain. "What are you doing? You're a doctor, what business do you have here?" After scanning Chen Ci's WeChat, he warmly reminded me, "Make sure to eat on time, don't eat cold food, it's bad for your stomach." He had brought me stir-fried lettuce, ginger-based soup, garlic shrimp, apples, pineapples, mangoes, and kiwis, everything I love to eat. I was surprised and asked, "Mr. Chen, how did you know these are my favorites?" Chapter for my foster mother asked me for my uncle's phone number. Chen Ci's expression did not show the same surprise as mine, but he smiled and said, "Really? I didn't know, what a coincidence, then we are so destined to meet." Actually, I was quite embarrassed to eat, but the two of them were very warm and friendly, and then I started to eat under their gaze. It tasted really good, very similar to the one from Fulinman, but not the same. I asked him where he bought it so I could buy it there in the future. After all, I am quite familiar with the area around here. However, I don't know which restaurant, hotel or restaurant can make such delicious food. He was quite strange, hesitating and not giving any specific answer. Yi Heng said quickly, "Actually, it was made by his wife. His wife sent it to him at the company. He got tired of it and brought it to you because he was afraid you would dislike it." Chen Ci was stunned for a moment, then nodded quickly, "Yes, my wife did it, I'm sorry." I smiled gently, "Why should I be embarrassed? You bought it for me outside, and I was already very grateful. I didn't expect that my wife made it for you herself. I am even more grateful. I am so lucky. Mr. Chen is kind and enthusiastic, and his wife is gentle and virtuous. They are match made in heaven. I really envy them. Yi Heng, who was standing next to him, took a sip of water and choked. He laughed. That's right, they are a perfect match, a match made in heaven. Did I lick it too much and make myself look ridiculous? After dinner, I insisted on being discharged from the hospital. Yi Heng and Chen Ci both enthusiastically offered to take me home, but I politely declined. I had troubled them once, so I couldn't trouble them twice, right? When I walked out of the hospital, it was still raining, with drizzles falling. At this time, my cell phone rang. It was my adoptive mother Cao Meru who called. Hello, Xiao Xiao wants Li Yang's contact information. Go get it and send it to my phone. I frowned. I don't know him well. Cao Meru on the other end of the phone sneered. Of course you don't know him well. What's his status? Even if you marry Yang Zhan and become his nephew's wife, you'll only be able to climb up to his trouser leg. He may not even look at you straight in the eye. However, I mean that you should ask Yang Zhan for it. Yang Zhan is his nephew, so he must have his contact information. Let me be frank. Xiao Xiao likes him. Maybe she will be your aunt in the future. Oh, look at how complicated the relationship is. When the time comes, will you call Xiao Xiao sister or aunt? Xiao Xiao is pretty, he is handsome, and our family is well matched. It can be considered a business marriage. As long as you give Xiao Xiao his contact information, Xiao Xiao is very confident that she can win him over. The Xiao family was a nouveau riche family. They won 160 million yuan in the lottery that year and became billionaires from ordinary people overnight. Under pressure from public attention and in the desire to improve their social status and reputation, the couple went to the orphanage with great fanfare and adopted me, who was 8 years old. Over the years, they have founded several public welfare and charity organizations, and relying on flattery, they are now on the edge of the upper class in Yangjing City. However, the nobles looked down on them, not only because of their money, but also because of their education and knowledge. As for Li Yang, he was the man at the top of the pyramid, a business tycoon in Yangjing City. The Yang family could barely get to him because of their relationship with him. How could the upstart Xiao family get to him? I was amused by Cao Meru's confident words and said, Aunt Cao is as confident as ever. Cao Meru on the other side suddenly raised her voice. Jing Shu, what do you mean? Is it so difficult to help? I refused. No help. Cao Meru's voice became sharper. You are such an ungrateful person. You don't know how to be grateful. People know that if they raise a dog, they will guard the door. We shouldn't have adopted you in the first place. Now that you have grown up and got married, you don't take us seriously anymore. You won't even ask us for a favor. I had long been accustomed to her harsh words, and I retorted without giving her any face, shouldn't you and your wife be grateful to me? You adopted me hypocritically, gained fame and fortune, and relied on me to gain a good reputation, making a good living, and making a lot of money. You don't have Alzheimer's disease, how come you can't tell the difference? I am an ungrateful wolf, then what are you? A sinister and cunning fox, a cruel and merciless snake and scorpion, a jackal and leopard without any conscience. Cao Meru was furious. Fortunately, you're not my biological child. I couldn't give birth to someone as sarcastic and mean as you. I sneered. Fortunately, I am not your biological child, otherwise I would have inherited your beastly heart and become another scourge to society. I love my motherland, which is prosperous, strong and harmonious. She roared. Jing Shu, at least we raised you for 7 years. Oh, I've worked like a slave for you three for the past 7 years, taking care of your food, drink, and toilet. According to the entry-level salary for a live-in nanny in Yangjing City, it's 8,000 a month, 96,000 a year, and 672,000 for 7 years. You haven't paid me this money yet. How dare you ask me for money? If we hadn't adopted you and spent money on your medical treatment, you would have died a long time ago. How can you say that we saved your life and we haven't asked you to repay us yet? Speaking of the orphanage, my thoughts drifted away, my heart ached and was blocked. I was no longer in the mood to continue arguing with her, so I just said, yes, you saved my life. When you die, I will definitely buy a few more wreaths to attend your funeral to repay you for your kindness. After saying that, he hung up the phone and blocked the person. I hate them, not because they adopted me with false sincerity, nor because they beat and scolded me after the adoption, but because on the night of my 18th birthday, they sent me to the bed of a rich man in order to curry favor with him. I almost lost my innocence, which cast a huge shadow on me. Fortunately, Yang Chen showed up in time to save me, and from that moment on, I fell in love with him. As for Li Yang, I also saw him from a distance the day before the wedding, when he had just left Yang's house and got into the car. I do know a little about his legend. He lived abroad since he was a child. He was low-key and did a good job of keeping secrets, so there was almost no news about him before he was 24 years old. It was not until he returned to China at the age of 24 to establish a company and named it Shuyang. In the shortest period of 3 years, it became a listed company, and in just 5 years, it developed into a large enterprise with global influence, with industries covering finance, construction, machinery, banking, trade, mining, steel, etc. He started from scratch and has far surpassed his parents. He has now become a legend in the business world, gaining a good reputation and honor, which is extremely admirable. A flower in Galing, at the age of 30, he doesn't even have a rumored girlfriend. However, it is said that Jingyu, the #1 socialite in Yangjing City, has been pursuing him. I also heard that even the dozen or so pets in his house are male. Cao Meiru was right. I really only got close to Yang Yang. This person's identity, worth, and status were far above Yang Yang's. In addition, his relationship with his uncle was very ordinary. Even he himself could not easily contact Li Yang. I was just about to stop a car on the side of the road when a black, low-key luxury car stopped by the side of the road. Soon the car door opened, and a tall and straight man walked out. He was holding a black umbrella and hurried towards me. Even though his steps were fast, he still revealed an elegant and calm demeanor. His outfit is simple, a black suit with a turtleneck sweater, black pants and leather shoes. Different from Yang Zhen's ostentatious and luxurious clothing, his outfit tends to be simple and generous, comfortable and natural, showing his mature and steady temperament and gentlemanly taste. He quickly stopped in front of me, keeping a short distance away, with the umbrella in his hand tilted slightly towards me. I looked up at him in surprise, a hint of shock flashing across my pupils. Chapter 5 That Dog Deserves to Die. The man was at least 1.85 meters tall, with an outstanding bone structure, deep and three-dimensional features, strong and sharp facial lines, and facial features like a painting by a master, with some exotic and fashionable qualities. The most attractive thing is the pair of deep-set eyes, which are deep and bright, and you will feel like you are being sucked in at a glance. And he was Yang Zhan's uncle Li Yang. At the same time, even though this was only the second time we met, I always felt that he was familiar. His eyes lingered on my face briefly, not looking at me too much, but being polite. His voice was magnetic, low but cool, and very pleasant to the ear. What a coincidence. Get in the car. I think I'm going to divorce Yang Zhan, and I don't want to have anything to do with him or anyone related to him. I was just about to refuse. Li Yang was already walking on my left side, took the lead and said, "It will rain heavily later, so it will be difficult to call a taxi." I didn't say no, and I followed his footsteps inexplicably. It was obvious that the umbrella was tilting more and more towards me, and because his legs were so long, he seemed to be taking small steps deliberately. "Come to the car." He continued to hold the umbrella for me with one hand and opened the car door with the other. I bent down and got in, sitting on the inside near the window, sitting upright, stiffly and nervously. After all, this man possesses money, power, and status, and is an unattainable existence in Yangjing City. Just thinking about it makes people feel both awe and fear. Soon he put away his umbrella and sat in, keeping a distance from me. His pressure was too strong, and I was not familiar with him. I didn't know what to say for a moment, so I just said 2 words respectfully and gently, "Thank you." He hummed and made no attempt to continue communicating with me. Instead, he held his tablet computer on his crossed legs and browsed the stock market and financial news. I was relieved, but I was afraid that he would do nothing and the atmosphere would be awkward, so I had to find a topic to talk about. It was indeed raining heavily outside. This kind of weather made me feel even more dull and depressed. It was ridiculous to think that I got injured on the wedding anniversary that I had been looking forward to. Suddenly, he asked me, "Are we going home?" I was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "I'm going to my best friend's house. I haven't seen her for a long time. It's on Nanyang Avenue, in the Guiyuan community next to the first bridge." I didn't want him to know what happened at home. He said nothing. The driver in front spoke kindly, "Okay, Miss Jing." The entire car began to become quiet. The driver probably felt it was too quiet, so he played a song on purpose. It turned out to be Sweet Honey. He also hummed, "Sweet, your smile is sweet, like flowers blooming in the spring breeze." She didn't seem to care whether she was out of tune or not, and sighed, The songs nowadays are all noisy, the old songs are still better, Mr. Lee, don't you think so?" "This is an old song, I loved it when I was a kid." I secretly glanced at the serious and taciturn CEO next to me, and I always felt that it was a little funny for him to listen to this song. He caught my sneak glance and looked up at me, and I immediately lowered my head in embarrassment. He returned his gaze to the tablet and asked casually, "What's wrong with your head?" I pretended to be nonchalant and said, "I was accidentally knocked down by a dog and got hurt." At this moment, he suddenly snapped the tablet shut. I was startled. But when I looked at his beautiful face, I couldn't see any emotion. Even his tone was calm and even, "That dog deserves to die." For some reason, I felt creepy. The man next to him lowered his eyes nonchalantly, leaned back on the neck pillow of the chair, and tapped the tablet lightly with his bony fingers. The whole person is relaxed and casual. Fortunately, the car arrived at Yihan's neighborhood. I politely thanked him and the driver and got off the car quickly. Suddenly, he said, "Wait a minute." I turned around and gave him a curved smile. "What's wrong?" He took out the black umbrella and handed it to me. "Here, it's still raining." To be honest, I was quite touched. This uncle is a gentleman and considerate. He is not as mean and thoughtful as others say. I looked at him. His face was calm and peaceful, and his eyes were expressionless, yet they seemed to be able to penetrate my heart. I always feel that he looks familiar, but I just can't remember where. He seemed to let me stare at him, his brows unchanged, his eyes looking at me coldly. I hastily turned my eyes away and did not take his umbrella. Instead, I smiled gently and said, "Thank you. It's raining less now. I can reach my best friend's house in a few steps. You can come to me if you need any help." Just as I was about to turn around, he suddenly said this. "Since I met Yangjun, I have only met him once, and we haven't even greeted each other face to face, so our relationship can almost be said to be that of strangers." I always thought that his relationship with the Yang family was very ordinary. After all, the two families seldom visited each other. Li Kaiman had said bad things about Li Yang's mother Mi Yingwei in front of me countless times, saying that she was an 18th-tier actress, that she shamelessly climbed into Li Zhenhong's bed, and that she was as greedy and vain as I was. However, if it were not for Li Yang, the Li family could only be considered a wealthy family, and before Li Kaiman married Yang Zhen's father, they were only a small businessman. At that time, Mi Yingwei was already a famous celebrity and was completely worthy of Li Zhenhong. What surprised me was that when Yang Chan got married, Li Yang was so generous as to give him a 1 billion investment as a gift, which not only saved Yang Chan's group, but also made him the president. I think, after all, he is my uncle, so he still has some affection for the Yang family, right? I am going to divorce Yang Zhan now, and we will never have any contact in the future. Even if something really happens, I won't have the audacity to go to him. But out of gratitude and politeness, I smiled faintly, "Thank you, uncle." His brows seemed to frown, and I didn't know if I saw it wrong, so I added in time, "Then I'll go in first, bye." After saying that, I turned around and trotted into the community. I looked back and found that the car was still parked at the entrance of the community. Arriving at her best friend Yihan's house without prior notice, Yihan was surprised for a few seconds, then said happily, "Jing Shu, why are you here suddenly?" When I married Yang Zhuan a year ago, she cried with excitement and kept hugging me tightly and said, "Jing Shu, you can finally be happy forever." I also thought that I could finally be happy forever. She and I went to the same school for elementary, middle, and high school. Before this incident, Yang Zhan, Yihan, my grandmother, and my deceased older brother were the most important people in my life. Now, Yang Zhan has been kicked out. She noticed the injury on my forehead and asked anxiously what happened. I told her the truth, putting on a fake smile. After the divorce, I will be freer. Kind people are more likely to cry. Tears welled up in Yihan's eyes. She was indignant for me. "Why does he treat you like this? It was him who pursued you madly in the beginning, and it was him who proposed to you, and it was he who promised to love you forever. Now he actually betrays you. Is he a human being? You married him and suffered so much at home. His mother despised the poor and loved the rich. She always looked down on you and bullied you. You worked hard and served them without complaint. Does he have a conscience? Chapter 6, Wedding Anniversary Gift for You. You were 18, such a good age, and you followed him. You dated for 4 years and got married for 1 year, a total of 5 years. If he didn't like you, you should have told him earlier. Why was he wasting 5 years of your youth? I really didn't expect that he would be such a man. I'm going to call him right now and scold him to death. I'm also going to question him face to face. I listened quietly with a smile on my face. I thought that Yihan was the only one in this world who would be angry for me and feel sorry for me. She is obviously timid, but she is always so brave for me, just like when she was in high school. I reached out to wipe the tears from her eyes and smiled softly. Okay, you, don't get angry and hurt yourself. There's no need to waste your breath scolding him. I took a deep breath and pursed my lips. It doesn't matter, just get a divorce. It's not like I can't live without him. Yihan hugged me and said, okay, I'll listen to you. Jian Bojin happened to be on a business trip, but this is your home whether he's on a business trip or not. In the future, if you don't want to get married again, I'll let my future children take care of you in your old age. I'm glad that I have such a good best friend. I turned off my phone and slept until the next morning. I was still woken up by Yihan. When I got up, I found that it was already 8:30. I haven't gotten up so late in a long time. Yihan told me that Ying Chen had been downstairs the whole time, having arrived at around 4 or 5 in the morning and had been waiting until now. It was 4 or 5 in the morning, not last night, and our wedding anniversary had long passed. I opened my cell phone and saw more than 40 missed calls. It was rare that he never answered my calls. I lay in bed until noon, opened the window and saw that he was still waiting downstairs. He has lost patience with me since we got married, and he actually waited so long today. I went downstairs to meet him. His slender figure was leaning against the car body, wearing an elegant suit. The midday sun shone on him, casting a layer of light on him, making him dazzling and charming. Just like before, every time he waited. He saw me coming out, took a few steps closer, and handed me a delicate velvet box in his hand. Wedding anniversary gift, Bulgari double stone diamond ring, I think you should like it. It's late for wedding anniversary gifts now and I don't like it at all. I didn't even glance at it and said coldly, no need. He cast his eyes on my forehead, his voice a little hoarse, and there was a hint of pity in his eyes. Does it hurt a lot? I said expressionlessly, your mother should have told you that I want a divorce, right? I haven't prepared the divorce agreement yet. I'll prepare it this afternoon. Wait for me at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Having said that, I turned around. He immediately stepped forward and pulled me, saying, I'm sorry. I shook his hand off fiercely, anger welling up in my dark eyes. Don't touch me. There was surprise in his eyes. Maybe he was the one who asked me not to touch him before, but now I asked him not to touch me. I know everything that happened. My mother was indeed wrong. I scolded her and Aunt Ka was fired. There was a rare hint of apology in his voice, and his eyes were gentle and deep. I didn't care, and then he continued, the dog died, too. I looked at him in surprise. Dead. That Rottweiler was Li Kaiman's favorite, and he spent millions on it every year. How could she bear to die? He suddenly stepped forward, lowered his head, and reached out to tidy up my slightly messy hair. His eyes were filled with deep affection. I'm sorry for hitting me. He held my hand and pressed it against his chest. I pulled my hand back, clenched my fingers, stepped back a few steps, and sneered, do you think that I want a divorce because of your mother? His dark eyes flashed with confusion. So, what's the other reason? I suddenly realized that this man is quite good at disguise. Doesn't he feel guilty? I said bluntly, your lover called me at midnight the day before yesterday, and I think I should give up my position as Mrs. Yang to her. I looked cheerful on my face, even smiling, but my heart felt as if it was stuffed with lead, heavy and blocked. What lover? He still asked me with a puzzled look on his face. The big internet celebrity you follow, Bo Mayer, it turns out you like this type. Indeed, if it's big enough, any man would like it. My tone was teasing and sarcastic. A gust of wind blew, the spring breeze was warm, but my whole body was cold, and my heart was even colder. His deep, dark eyes stared at me, leaving me confused. After a few seconds, he explained, I have nothing to do with her. It's not what you think. So, why were you with her in the middle of the night? Why did she use your phone to call me? Why did you pay attention to her alone? You ignored me for the past year because of her, right? I'll throw out a few questions at once and I need a reasonable explanation. You don't believe me? He frowned slightly, with disappointment in his eyes. I was so angry that my chest rose and fell rapidly. I stared at him and asked, "So, what's your explanation?" There was obvious impatience in his tone. "Since you don't believe me, I have nothing to explain." An indescribable burning pain welled up in my heart, and tears welled up in my eyes. People are calling to provoke me. How can you expect me to trust you? "So, you think I cheated?" he asked. I laughed angrily. "What else? Since you have nothing to do with her, why didn't you tell me openly when you met her? Why did you appear in the same high-end club as her after the wedding was hastily ended?" I roared, "Why are you hiding this from me?" He suddenly threw away the gift, stretched out his long arm, grabbed my hand, and I was pulled to him unexpectedly. Then, he squeezed my shoulders hard with both hands. His face was cold, there was fire in his eyes, and his voice was close to a growl. "Aren't you the same? Have you told me everything you did?" My heart trembled. I didn't understand what he meant, let alone why he was so angry. But, it was clearly him who did something wrong. It was clearly him who was indifferent to me after marriage. Even if he didn't cheat on me, it was him who failed to keep a distance from the opposite sex. As a married man, you should try your best to avoid inappropriate intimate contact with the opposite sex. I raised my face stubbornly and looked into his eyes, feeling angry. "Why should I tell you?" He exerted force with both hands. My shoulders collapsed in pain and I almost collapsed to the ground. At this moment, I felt even more chilled. My heart spasmed and tears suddenly rolled down from the corners of my eyes. He quickly let go of my hands and apologized hurriedly. "I'm sorry, does it hurt?" I turned pale and ignored him. He took a deep breath and lowered his voice, saying softly and deeply, "Jing Shu, I didn't cheat on you, and I didn't do anything to let you down. I despise her even more. You believe me?" I asked him in confusion. "Then tell me, do you still love me?" He stared at me and said one word without hesitation: "Love." At this time, his phone rang. He answered the phone, and I heard the assistant on the other end of the line seem to say that a partner suddenly wanted to terminate the contract and offered to pay the penalty. Yang Chen's face was tense. "Did you ask why?" "I'll go there myself." He hung up the phone and looked at me. "My mom was wrong. I won't be angry even if you scold her and beat Aunt Cow. I didn't cheat on you. I know you are in a bad mood. You can go to your bestie's house and take a rest. I will take care of this matter and then come to pick you up." After that, he forced the gift into my hand and took out a card. "You didn't bring anything with you when you came out, including your card. I put another 1 million yuan into this. You can spend whatever you want to eat or buy." Chapter 7. He took his mistress to the gynecology department. After he left, I stood there for a long time. I don't quite understand him. He can deny cheating, but he won't explain. And then he suddenly treats me so well that I thought he still loves me. Return to Yihan's home. She was curled up on the sofa, holding her abdomen, her face pale and her expression painful. She thought it was her period and said she would just lie down on the sofa and rest. I watched her pain become more and more severe, so I insisted on taking her to the hospital. Examination results showed that she was pregnant but had threatened miscarriage. Yihan has been married for 3 years but has not been able to get pregnant. She is very eager to have a baby, and this is undoubtedly a great joy. However, the doctor's words poured cold water on us again. The doctor said, "Did you have an abortion in an irregular place before? Your uterus was not repaired in time, and an old cervical laceration was formed. If you move a lot, you will bleed, and in severe cases, you will have a miscarriage. You cannot have surgery during pregnancy. It will affect the fetus. You can only lie down and rest more, and don't do any strenuous exercise." I looked at Yihan's pale face, my eyes moistened, and I said guiltily, "I'm sorry." She pretended to be angry. "I've said it before, you haven't done anything wrong to me, and you are not allowed to say sorry in the future, otherwise we will not be best friends anymore." Soon, her face was filled with smiles, and she stroked her belly. "Let's not talk about that. Today is a good day. I'm a mother now." I pursed my lips and felt sad, but neither she nor I wanted to talk about high school. Yihan asked me again, "How did you guys talk?" I handed her the peeled fruit and briefly told her the conversation. She said, "Do you still want a divorce? I saw how much he loved you before, and I also know how much you love her. If he didn't cheat, your only problem would be his mother. Can you talk to him about moving out? If he agrees and is willing to protect you in the future, can you give him another chance? Just think about it, he's willing to kill his mother's precious dog for you. I was a little confused by what she said, so I changed the subject. Tomorrow morning when the doctor goes to work, I will go ask her what you need to eat more. I will go buy you some groceries early in the morning and cook them for you when I get home. You must eat until you are plump and white, and the child must be plump too. You haven't tasted my cooking for a long time. Yihan knew that I didn't want to continue talking about this, so she touched her belly and smiled. Baby, look, your godmother is so good to you. When you grow up, you must also be good to your godmother. I slept on the bed next to him at night. After Yihan fell asleep, I took out my cell phone. Chen Ci sent me a message. Miss Jing, aren't you inviting me to dinner? I'm free the day after tomorrow, how about Fulanman? I like the food there, I'll book a private room for you, Prince Gong Hall. Fulanman is the only century-old restaurant in Yangjing City. Its unique taste and rich cultural connotations have attracted countless guests. It is a large courtyard with a corridor in front and a building in the back. The whole restaurant is comfortable and elegant. Therefore, it is difficult to get a seat, let alone book a private room. Those who go to eat there are either rich or noble. Even if you have money, you still have to book a seat a week in advance. However, Chen Ci was able to book a seat easily, which shows that he is not an ordinary person. However, the prices inside are not cheap. I didn't want to spend Yang Zhan's money, and I only had 10,000 yuan left in my own piggy bank, so I gritted my teeth and replied, okay, the day after tomorrow is my birthday, what a coincidence. Chen Sihui, har har, what a coincidence, it seems we are destined to be friends. At this time, Yang Chen also sent a message, have you slept? Are you used to sleeping at Yihan's house? It's your birthday the day after tomorrow. I remember that you like to eat the ginger sea-based soup from Fulanman the most. I will take you there to eat. In the past, he often took me to Fu Lin Men for dinner, just because I really liked the ginger sea-based soup there, and the other dishes there were also to my taste. I replied indifferently, no thanks. The other party replied almost immediately, are you still angry? I'll pick you up early the day after tomorrow. I saw you cut that skirt, so I made you another one. Finally, he called again and said, I don't want to get divorced. Can you please not mention it in the future? Looking at these words, my thoughts became a tangled web, getting tighter and tighter, reaching my heart. The first time I met him was when I was on my way to report to the university. He had a car accident. When the car was about to explode, I risked my life to save him. I just did a good deed, but he started to pursue me passionately, working part-time for me, fighting for me, giving me gifts, carrying me on his back for a day on the mountain road, staying with me all night when I was sick, and appearing in time to save me when I was desperate. Yihan often said enviously, Yang Chen loves you so much. I typed and asked, if we move out, just the two of us, would you be willing? He replied, yes. My eyes were sore and tears were welling up in my eyes. I quickly turned off the phone and forced myself not to look at it. Yihan's husband didn't arrive at the hospital until the next morning. He was very excited. He kissed and hugged Yihan, and said to her belly, baby, call daddy. I came out tactfully and wanted to go to the outpatient clinic to ask the doctor what she needed to eat more. I met many loving couples along the way. Their husband was so gentle and considerate. I remembered that before, when I only had slight menstrual pain, Yang Chen insisted on taking me to the hospital. The more I thought about it, the more sad I felt, and tears rolled down my cheeks and almost fell. Just as I turned my head away to avoid being seen by passers-by, I saw a familiar figure in the number 3 clinic next to me, and there was a woman sitting next to the figure. My steps suddenly stopped, and my heart felt like it was being pressed down by a huge rock, giving me a suffocating feeling. After a while, I took out my cell phone with trembling hands and called Yang Zhan. I saw him take out his cell phone from his pocket, press a button randomly to silence the ringtone, then impatiently put the phone back in and continued to ask the doctor for precautions. I stood at the door, my tear glands were sore and swollen, and my throat was choked with pain. At this time, Yang Zhan and Bo Mayer came out. Yang Chen was holding a prescription from the doctor. He looked up and saw me standing at the door. He looked normal, but his tone was full of surprise. Why are you here? I looked at the woman next to him. It was the woman that Yang Douyin followed. Her figure was even more curvaceous than in the video. This was also the woman who called me that night. At that moment, my heart seemed to be shrouded in a thick dark cloud, dull and depressing, and my whole weak body was shaking uncontrollably. So, he said yesterday that he didn't cheat. So, he said I didn't trust him. So, you were so gentle last night, but today you brought your mistress to the gynecology department. Bomia looked at me with a smile, as if she knew me, without any panic. I looked away, suppressed my emotion, and asked, why didn't you answer my call? Before Yang Chen could speak, Bo Mayer beside him said, Jing Shu, don't get me wrong. I had my period and I had menstrual cramps, so he sent me to the hospital. I was just listening to the doctor's instructions, so it was inconvenient for him to answer your call. Her voice did not match her beautiful appearance. It was rather shrill, with a long tail and a very coquettish tone. It was different from that night, but you could tell it was the same person. I still looked at Yang Chen. So, don't you think what you said yesterday was ridiculous? Bo Mayer said first, don't get me wrong, Yang Chen and I are just ordinary friends. He is kind-hearted and just sent me to the hospital. Nothing happened between us. It's innocent. Am I asking you? In what capacity are you answering me? Is your job to be his mouthpiece, or are you born with a shameless trait? I am usually gentle and good-tempered, and rarely lose control of my emotions, but at this moment I was like a hedgehog, aggressive. Chapter 8, one side is a green tea bitch, the other side is a white lotus. Yang Chen seldom looked at me like this, and there was something of curiosity in his black eyes as he looked at me. I continued to scold her angrily. Also, didn't you call me to provoke me that night? How come you've become just ordinary friends now, innocent and pure? Do you have a split personality? On one hand, you're a green tea bitch, and on the other hand, you're a white lotus. You should go see a psychiatrist. Bo Mayer was not angry, but opened her red lips and said in surprise, Jingshu, you have changed so much. She added, with a hint of sarcasm at the corners of her mouth, I remember you weren't like this in high school. I poured a bucket of water on your head and you didn't get angry. High school. I looked at the woman carefully and thought she looked familiar. Suddenly a figure appeared in my mind, the one who bullied me in high school. Lin Mai. Her whole face may have changed too much due to plastic surgery. So, my husband and the person who used to bully me followed each other on Douyin, spent the night together offline, and gently sent her to the hospital. My eyes instantly turned red, and I stared at Yang Chen angrily. What do you mean? Yang Chen took a few steps towards me. I took a few steps back. I usually spoke softly, but now I raised my voice in anger. Yang Zhen, you clearly know that when she was in high school. When I was in high school, I was really rebellious. I always scolded you and beat you, and even isolated you with my classmates. Now that I've grown up, I realize how much of a jerk I was when I think back to those days. I'm sorry. I've actually been wanting to find a chance to apologize to you in person. How about you beat me up to vent your anger? Bo Mayer rushed to answer again and stretched her face forward. I was so angry that I lost my mind and raised my hand to slap Bomia, but my husband held my wrist tightly and several people were watching nearby. Yang Chen's tone was very restrained and gentle, as if he cared about me very much. Jing Shu, you are not in good health, you can't get too excited. If you have anything to say, let's talk about it when we get back. I found this funny and struggled to pull my hand back. Bo Mayer reached out and grabbed Yang Zhan's arm. Yang Zhan, let Jing Shu beat me. I was definitely wrong in high school. Yang looked at me with fire in his eyes, swearing at every word. In high school, she herself wasn't much better. I don't understand. Yesterday he was so sweet and said he would take me to Fu Lin Men for dinner and also said he would give me a birthday present. Why is he like this today? I sneered and said, so both of you have dual personalities. You are the same. He said this out of nowhere, and I was completely confused. Jing Shu, don't be angry. Just hit me. It's not good to be angry. Don't be like me. Being angry causes menstrual cramps. Pop. I slapped her really hard across the face. I was surprised that Yang Zhan didn't stop me this time, and Bo Mayer was even more surprised than me. She looked at Yang Zhan with shock, but the man had an indifferent look on his face, as if he was quietly observing everything. I slapped his handsome face again, but now I felt that his face was extremely ugly. Yang Zhan's skin was very white, and red marks soon appeared on it. Bo Mayer screamed, Jing Shu, it's okay for you to hit me, but why did you hit him? Who do you think you are? She came forward and tried to push me. Yang Chen stepped in front of her, frowning, looking slightly angry. This is a matter between us as husband and wife. This made Bo Mayer look embarrassed. I didn't understand what he meant. I just felt my palms were numb from the shock. After all, this slap took all my strength. I was a little out of breath, but I still insisted on finishing the whole sentence. Yang Zhen, you make me sick. After saying this, he left with light steps. I once told Yang Zhen countless times that I hated a woman named Lin Mai. I also told him how Lin Mai bullied me during her 3 years in high school. He said, "Be good, no one will bully you in the future. I will protect you." Although Lin Mai has changed her name now, it is obvious that she knows that Bo Mayer is Lin Mai. Yang Chen did not catch up. When I was in the elevator, I glanced at Lin Mai and saw that her face was full of heartache. She said, "It's all my fault. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have been beaten up." But she definitely didn't mean to hit you. She was just angry. I think Lin Mai's level is very high. And who is Yang Chen? He is shrewd and wise, as cunning as a fox. When he was 20 years old, his father died due to severe shock due to the group's broken capital chain, insolvency and bankruptcy. He joined the group his father worked for, and the group soon came back to life and became profitable under his leadership. He also made the business bigger and bigger, increasing the turnover tenfold in just a few years. He is now worth tens of billions, and became the new president a year ago. How could such a person not see the true face of this woman? Unless he was willing. Walking out of the hospital, I tried to control my emotions, but my heart was torn with pain and my tears couldn't stop flowing. It was not until my eyes were swollen and I could no longer cry that I took a taxi to the vegetable market and bought a divorce agreement on the way. Yang sent me a WeChat message. "Why are you in the hospital? Is your head still hurting? Or is it something else?" I didn't reply to him. He sent several ? I typed a few words. "I will prepare the divorce agreement and send it to your residence." After saying that, I blocked him. I have tried to please his indifference, I have also been silent, and now, I want to leave. There are too many things that are not satisfactory in my life, and I want to escape from all of them. I quit my job after I married Yang Zhen. I had no job and no income after marriage, and all the houses, cars, and companies under his name were his premarital property. However, the income of 1 year after marriage belongs to our common property. His income should be 100 million a year, right? It is not too much for me to take half of it, 50 million. I don't want any other daily necessities in the house, I just want this money. After filling it out, I asked someone to deliver it to his home. After all, if I sent it to his company, I wasn't sure if he could see it. Later, I bought some vegetables and went back to Yihan's home to cook, and then sent them to her in the hospital. I didn't say a word about what happened afterwards. The next day, I decided to go to work. During this year of marriage, I slowly lost myself and my soul. I was blinded by the trivialities of life and could not see anything. Fortunately, I found that there was a bottomless abyss under my feet, so I decided to grow wings and fly out to see the world, which is actually very beautiful. My major in college was piano tuning, and the program lasted 3 years. I am a senior piano tuner, and I am engaged in piano sound quality adjustment, pitch laws, mechanical adjustments, and component repairs. I started working as a part-time piano tuner in my sophomore year. After graduating from college, I worked at Jean Music Store for a year. When I decided to get married, I quit my job. The store manager Meng Liwen contacted me many times and asked me to continue working in the store, offering me a pay raise. A music store specializes in selling musical instruments and providing music training. Jean Musical Instruments is the leading music store in the city, with more than 300 branches. This branch is not very large, but it has been open the longest, with more than 30 employees and over 500 students. I called Meng Liwen in advance. She was very excited and offered me a salary of 30 million, which was 10,000 higher than my previous salary. Chapter 9 Tuning up the piano amazes everyone. She introduced me to everyone and was full of praise for me. A lot of new people have joined the store, including newcomers and old colleagues. My old colleagues all know me. The reason I resigned was to get married. Everyone mocked me behind my back, saying that I had used some tricks to hook up with a rich man and became a wealthy wife, and that I didn't want to work anymore. They had met Yang Chen once or twice. Although they could tell that he was worth a lot of money, they didn't know who he was. After all, they were all ordinary people and Yang Chen rarely appeared in front of the media, so it was normal that they didn't know him. The person who confronted me head-on was Miao Ning, 27 years old, a receptionist, unmarried. When she saw Yang Zhan, she was about to strike up a conversation with him, but she found out that he was my boyfriend, and she became filled with jealousy. She introduced me to the new employees in a low voice. This person used to work here. Her name is Jingshu. She quit her job after getting married and went home to be a rich wife. She doesn't have to work because her husband can support her. We don't have to work hard like this. Now that you suddenly come to work, I guess it's hard to be a rich wife, or your family is out of money. Everyone looked at me. I ignored it, and I wasn't in the mood to pay attention to it. The new employee was secretly a little dissatisfied, wondering why I gave him a high salary of 30,000 yuan right after he arrived. Meng Liwen said to everyone, "Don't underestimate Jing Shu's young age. She is a senior mediator and a leader in our field. She is the one I admire the most." At this time, a man in his 50s stood upstairs. He was very dignified, but his expression was full of contempt. "You are a senior tuner at such a young age. I rarely see such a person. Which college did you graduate from? How many years have you been engaged in this profession?" I answered gently, "I have been working at Suiju Vocational College of Arts and Literature for 1 year. Meng Liwen told me on the phone that the music store headquarters had a new boss, who went to the thatched cottage 3 times to invite a big shot to take charge, and because this was his hometown, he voluntarily came to this branch of the music store. His name is Wang Dehai. He graduated from the Central Conservatory of Music and went abroad for further studies. He became a member of the National Musical Instrument Association and has been responsible for tuning pianos for concerts by famous pianists at home and abroad. He is very prestigious in the field of tuning and has students all over the world." After hearing my answer, Wang Dehai said with disdain, "I haven't even heard of this college. I thought you studied abroad, or maybe it was from a domestic college like the Central Conservatory of Music. Our Yangjing City Art College is at least a well-known college." He then asked, "How many years have you been working here?" I asked, 1 year. He looked surprised. "You've only been working for a year, and you're already a senior lawyer? Are you kidding me?" After saying that, he looked at Meng Liwen and accused her, "You are the store manager. You can't just get into our music store by relying on connections. Who doesn't have some real skills? You can't be a slacker and damage the reputation of the music store." Meng Liwen stood next to me and said confidently, "Teacher Wang, Jing Shu is really capable. The veteran artist Mr. Shen has praised her before." Wang Dehai stood upstairs, looking down at me with disdain on his face. He suddenly said, "I just happened to have a piano that needed tuning. I found it from a garbage dump. I wanted to use it to study my skills. Why don't you give it a try? We'll know if you have the real ability once you give it a try, and everyone will be convinced." Everyone looked at me, wondering whether I dared to agree. Meng Liwen smiled and said, "Teacher Wang, this is too difficult. I haven't tuned my piano for a year, so I'm a little rusty, but I also don't want to be gossiped about while earning a high salary of 30,000 yuan." I agreed, "Okay." Everyone was shocked. Miao Ning snorted coldly, "How dare you agree to this? Aren't you afraid of embarrassing yourself in front of teacher Gao?" I went to the attic, where there was a quiet environment and all kinds of tuning tools. There was also an upright piano, which was in very poor condition, very old, and very difficult to repair and tune. I took a closer look and found that not only were the strings rusty, but mice had also gotten into the piano and many of the felt and wooden parts had been bitten. Wang Dehai saw that I was a little hesitant, and snorted and laughed. "Why? Do you regret agreeing? This old piano does have a lot of problems. You young people are full of youthful vigor and like to show off. I'm not targeting you on purpose, I just want to know how capable you are, a young girl. Even Mr. Mi praised you. After all, this position has always been in short supply, but the more scarce the talent, the better the prospects. So now many young people are starting to set their sights on this industry, trying every way to get the qualifications to get in, causing our profession to have a worse and worse reputation. It makes me feel bad to see this." I smiled easily. "It's very easy to adjust." Wang Dehai was stunned for a moment, then said, "I am an elder after all, and I am not so stupid as to deliberately embarrass you. I will ask a tuner to come up and help you fix it, and then you can adjust it." No. I can fix it. I refuse. The look on his face when he looked at me seemed to say, just go ahead and blow it. He said, it will take days or even months to adjust it. I can adjust it before I get off work. I'm going to start tuning it. Wang Dehai looked me up and down, then walked out muttering to himself, and it was obvious that he didn't believe it. In fact, when it comes to tuning the piano, I can focus on it without having to think about other painful things. Yihan is in the hospital and is being taken care of by her husband. If I went there, I might just be a third wheel. I first diagnosed and analyzed the problem with the piano, and after understanding the specific problem, I began to take appropriate repair measures. After various parts are replaced and repaired, tuning can begin. I hold the tuning paddle in my left hand and tune the piano in a sitting position, depending on the piano. The piano is truly the king of musical instruments, possessing a wide range of tones and a large number of notes from low to high that other instruments do not possess. I have loved piano since I was a child. After I got married, Yang Chen bought me a piano, but Li Kaiman instigated a rift between me and my sister-in-law, and I ended up having the piano smashed by my sister-in-law. Later, my sister-in-law discovered that she had misunderstood me and took the initiative to apologize to me. Then she was sent abroad by Yang Zhen to study. It took a full 12 hours, from 8 in the morning to 8 in the evening, to tune the piano, which happened to be the time when everyone got off work. I could vaguely hear someone downstairs saying, "It's time to get off work." The guy above is still adjusting it. I guess he can't adjust it well. He's really good at bragging. I don't know how much he spent on that advanced qualification certificate. Someone else said, she's just trying to save face, but the store manager will definitely speak well of her and find a reason, and she will still get the 30,000 yuan salary as a matter of course. Wang Dehai stood at the door and said, "It's time to get off work, go home, forget it, I won't adjust it. I'll adjust it myself tomorrow, otherwise if it gets out, people will laugh at me for making things difficult for young people." With a smile on my face, I began to play the piano. My slender fingers jumped deftly on the black and white keys. Soon, a strange and terrifying melody sounded and spread downstairs. I heard the sound of everyone's messy footsteps and exclamations. A group of them ran up. Miao Ning pointed at me and said, "Jing Shu, what the hell are you playing? It's so awful. If you can't play it, don't play it." Everyone's expressions showed accusations against me. I smiled and said, "I'm just playing ghosts." Chapter 10. Like mother, like son. She didn't understand and snorted, "You're so arrogant. You said you'd fix it before you get off work. The piano wasn't tuned properly, otherwise it wouldn't be able to produce such a sound." However, Wang Dehai walked in from the crowd. He looked very excited and looked at me with admiration. He said, "Did you really fix it?" After that, he walked forward, rubbed his eyes, looked at the piano carefully, and asked in a trembling voice, "Is that the most difficult etude you just played in the world?" I smiled but said nothing. Miao Ning didn't understand and sneered, "What do you mean the most difficult exercise in the world? I've never heard such a difficult piece of music. It gives me goosebumps. If you can't adjust it, just tell the teacher directly. Is there any need to get mad here and scare people? You are the junior, it's not embarrassing to tell him, and we won't laugh at you. What do you know?" Wang Dehai turned around and scolded. He continued, "This piece of music requires extremely high performance skills from the performer and is a litmus test of the performer's ability." He looked at her with admiration. "At such a young age, you can not only tune instruments, but also play. You are simply a genius." "In fact, I only know the first part, I'm just pretending. This was taught to me by Mr. Shen." Wang Dehai sincerely apologizes to me. After all, he is a senior and has achieved great success. Naturally, I could not accept this apology. I gave him enough face and praised him. The rest of the people looked at me with admiration. Only Miao Ning was so angry that he gnashed his teeth. On my way home from get off work, I received a call from my mother-in-law, Li Kaiman. "Jing Shu, what do you mean? Not only did you drag your feet and ask my son to fire Aunt Cow, but you actually asked for a divorce from my son. And you even sent the divorce agreement to our house." I said in a cold tone, with a hint of anger, "Aren't you eager for me to divorce your son?" Li Kaiman on the other side almost roared, "Even if we want a divorce, it was Yang Chen who proposed it. It was he who didn't want you. You were the one who insisted on marrying him in the first place. What right do you have to propose it?" I've always been calm, but at this moment I couldn't help but yell. Why? Because your son cheated on me. There was silence for several seconds, and finally Lee Kaiman's indifferent voice came. Which rich man doesn't go out to play? What's more, Yang Chen is worth hundreds of billions and is a big CEO. Aren't many young masters who haven't inherited the family business still going out to play like crazy? Their wives, who are well matched with them, don't care. Besides, without him, where would you get the real money and a good life? He's been very good. He didn't kick you out, nor did he ask you to go out to clean up his mess. Don't you think about who you are? Now that you can marry into our Yang family and become a phoenix, you should behave yourself and stop interfering. You are not qualified to do so. Just hold your anger in. Lee Kaiman has always looked down on and disrespected me. She thinks I am marrying up her social status and that I am useless and can only be a full-time housewife at home who cannot show her face in public. To put it bluntly, it's a nanny. I couldn't help but sneer, like mother, like son. You think I'm not worthy of your son and don't deserve to enter your Yang family. It just so happens that I don't want to stay in your nest of snakes and rats. Now it's your son who doesn't want to divorce me. Please notify your son as soon as you see the divorce agreement and have him sign it and wait for me at the Civil Affairs Bureau. The man on the other end was probably so angry that he had a myocardial infarction. After a long while, he uttered only one word, you. I took over her words, you are just like a crooked top beam. After saying that, I hung up the phone and decisively blocked the person. I originally wanted to go to the hospital to see Yihan, but I saw the message Yihan sent me. Jingshu, my husband called my mother-in-law and asked her to come from the countryside to take care of me. I have been discharged from the hospital. I was a little angry. Yihan had a special physical condition and was very likely to have a miscarriage. She needed to stay in the hospital for a few more days. How could she be discharged just like that? When I returned to Yihan's house, I saw a chicken coop at the door. There were 3 hens clucking inside. The ground was covered with chicken feathers and chicken droppings, and the smell was pungent. The living room was also a mess, with 2 bags of luggage, pots and pans, radishes, cabbages, pickles, and charcoal. Zhang Suifang saw me opening the door by myself, and rushed over to me and yelled, "Who are you? How dare you come into my house without permission? I have never met her." At that time, Yihan and Jian Lingbo held their wedding in their hometown. I heard that there was a bridal chamber prank over there. It was Yihan who came forward and told her who I was and that I was going to live here for a long time. After hearing that, she looked me up and down and said with a smile, "When I came from my hometown, I didn't know that we had guests. Tonight, you can squeeze into my room for one night. Tomorrow morning, I will ask Yihan to clean up the utility room for you to live in." Yihan was a little embarrassed and said tactfully, "Mom, when Jian Lingbo and I bought the house, Jingshu gave me 15 yuan for decoration. I said at the time that this house is also her home, and that room is also prepared for her. All the bedding and other things in it were bought by Jingshu herself." After hearing this, Zhang Suifang smiled and whispered, "Oh, I really didn't pay a penny for this house. I don't deserve to live here. I'm just an outsider. It's okay. As long as you're happy, I can sleep in the toilet, not just the storage room." Then she added, "I am just a mother-in-law, how can I compare with your friend?" She turned around and went to the balcony, covering her mouth and crying, then called her son. When Yihan graduated from high school, he and Jian Lingbo came to Yangjing City to work hard. They bought this 3-bedroom, 1 living room house, about 100 square meters, for 600,000 yuan, and I paid 150,000 yuan for the decoration. In order to save money, Yihan refused any gifts or jewelry. Her mother-in-law Zhang Suifang also did not give a penny, saying that she had no money. Yihan is a gentle and kind person. She said, his parents are willing to provide financial support out of their good intentions, and it is understandable if they are unwilling or unable to do so. Soon Jian Lingbo called Yihan. I heard them arguing. I also heard Jian Lingbo say, "That's our mother. I'm her son. This is my home, and it's also her home. How can you let her live in the utility room? She came all the way from the countryside to take care of you. Aren't you disappointing her?" Zhang Suifang entered the living room, wiping her tears. "Why did we quarrel? Should I not have come? But I came here to serve you out of kindness. I didn't come here to eat and live for free. I also brought so many things with me. Otherwise, I should go back. I didn't want to destroy Yihan's family harmony, and I didn't want to put Yihan in a difficult position, so I decided to look for a house to live in after inviting Mr. Chen Ci to dinner the next day. Yihan insisted on not letting me move out, but he couldn't persuade me anymore and transferred 20,000 yuan to me. One reason was that he was worried that I didn't have enough money to rent a house, and the other was that tomorrow was my birthday. I took the money and said it was a loan. After all, I had to treat Mr. Chen to dinner tomorrow. Chapter 11. Are you unwilling now? The next day, I took a day off. When I woke up early in the morning, I saw the kitchen was full of smoke. I went in to take a look and found that Zhang Cuifang was stewing a hen with charcoal. I remembered that Yihan hated eating chicken since he was a child, let alone drinking its soup. She looked at me and said, "This is what I raised myself in my hometown. It's very nutritious. After Yihan drinks it, my precious grandson will definitely grow up to be plump and white." I said, "Auntie, Yihan doesn't seem to like chicken soup." She said nonchalantly, "She has to drink even if she doesn't like it. The baby in her belly needs nutrition. If she doesn't drink, what if the baby is as thin as her when she is born?" I had heard from Yihan before that the mother-in-law didn't like her very much and thought she was not worthy of Jian Lingbo. She thought her son should marry a beautiful, rich and white woman instead of an orphan like her. But she has a deep relationship with Jian Lingbo, and Jian Lingbo once said that she would not live with her parents. I helped with some housework and bought Yihan some of her favorite fruits. I didn't go out until almost 10 o'clock because we had an appointment to have lunch. When I got to the door, I heard her yelling into the room, "Yihan, why are you still sleeping? You need to get up early and go for a walk. It will be good for the baby in your belly." When I arrived at the gate of the community, I saw Yang Chen. He was leaning against the car body, wearing an expensive and luxurious high-end custom-made suit, which made his tall and handsome figure stand out. There was a cigarette between his bony fingers, which was almost burned out, but he didn't seem to notice. I pretended not to see him and walked straight past him. He threw the cigarette into the trash can next to him, walked forward, stretched out his long arm, and grabbed my wrist. I was caught off guard and was pulled in front of him, and then pressed hard against the car body. My back was pressed against the cold car body, and I was forced to look up at him. He leaned in close, his handsome face was stern, his eyes were cold. "How dare you send the divorce agreement to my house?" I endured the bitterness in my heart and said calmly, "Mr. Yang, if you came to me today to get a divorce at the Civil Affairs Bureau, then we will go now. If not, I'm sorry." The corners of my lips curved slightly. "I have something to do now, so I don't have time to chat with you." He stared at me fiercely, his face was grim, and he spoke every word with great emphasis. "Are you sure you want to divorce me?" I said in a firm voice, "Yes, I am absolutely sure. I have never been so sure about anything." He pressed my shoulders hard with his two big hands, his face was cold and terrifying, there was fire burning in his eyes, and he roared, "Say it again." The pain in my shoulder felt like it was crushed, but it was worse than the chill in my heart. I looked at the fierce and violent face in front of me, and I even began to forget how gentle he was before. I only remembered him saying, "My dear, how could I bear to be mean to you? I will never yell at you again in my life." Once upon a time, I thought his love words were everlasting, I thought his promises were forever, I thought our marriage would be happy forever. Once upon a time, I thought, but those were just my own thoughts. I met his gaze, tears flowing uncontrollably, my voice choked but clear, "Yang Zhan, let's get a divorce." His hands trembled, then he let go of my shoulders, turned around, opened the car door, took out the divorce agreement, and held it up. "Divorce agreement, right?" Next second, the agreement was torn into pieces, and the spring breeze blew away the scraps of paper. Just like when we were in college, he took the love letters someone gave me and tore them all up in front of me. He said, "These are love letters written to you by others, right? The difference is that he once tore away other people's love for me, and now he tore away my love for him. Don't even think about getting a divorce. You must stay by my side for the rest of your life." His domineering and sinister voice sounded again. I stared at him with slightly angry eyes and said in a teasing tone, "If you don't love me, why do you keep me by your side? Why? It's a pity to throw me away because it's tasteless. It seems that your internet celebrity lover is not attractive enough. If it was, you would have abandoned me decisively." He frowned, then curled his lips. "So, madam is jealous and angry." After saying that, he took a few steps closer to me, raised his hand and lifted my chin, his eyes deep. "I used to see you being docile and well behaved, but you've been rebellious these days, which is quite interesting. Yes, I never disobeyed him before, and was always gentle and submissive in front of him. Every time he came home, I would be the first to greet him, take the clothes from his arms, and say with a smile, "Husband, you are back. You have worked hard." Even when he is too lazy to pay attention to me, I am calm and quiet. I thought his hands were dirty, so I rudely knocked them down and mocked him, "Don't touch me, your hands are quite dirty." His expression suddenly changed. "What do you mean?" I sneered. "I mean, no wonder you didn't touch me for a year after we got married, because you had enough food outside." He was not angry, but asked meaningfully, "I didn't feed you enough, is this the reason for your divorce?" The next second, he suddenly picked me up by the waist and forced me into his car. Then he bent over and came in, aggressively pressing me down on the leather seat. A strong masculine scent instantly hit me in the face. I am thin and there is a huge difference in strength between men and women, so I can't resist at all. My long black hair was spread messily on the seat, one of my long snow-white legs hung down, my face was flushed due to anxiety, and a thin layer of sweat appeared on my body. He looked at me with burning eyes, full of desire, his throat rolling, just as he was about to kiss my lips, but he saw the tears in my eyes, and his dark eyes suddenly darkened. "Why? Don't you want to do it with me every day? You are so hungry and thirsty, but now you don't want to do it anymore." My tear glands were swollen and painful, my throat was choked and uncomfortable, and my heart ached as if it was torn apart and bleeding. Yes, I wanted to do it with you before. I was horny before because I loved you very much and wanted to be your woman. Now, I don't want to do it anymore. I just want a divorce. Oh, do you think you are qualified to talk about divorce? Are you worthy of saying the word divorce? Jingshu, I tell you, only I can file for divorce. I don't want a divorce, and you can never get a divorce in your life. My chest seemed to be choked by something, and my voice trembled slightly. Don't you want to marry me at all? Now that I take the initiative to file for a divorce, won't it be better for you? What did you say? His dark eyes darkened as he stared at me. You actually wanted to cancel the wedding the day before, didn't you? Since you regretted it then, I'm sorry. It's my fault. I shouldn't have been so shameless as to force you to marry me. Even if you have an affair with that woman now, even if she openly provokes me, even if she bullied me in high school, I have no right to blame you. After all, if I hadn't married you, what's going on between you and her now has nothing to do with me. Yangjin, let's get divorced. Let you go, and let me go. Chapter 12, Let you go and go to that bad guy? As he listened to me, a pale look appeared on his handsome face. His eyes flickered as if he was a little flustered, and his throat was rolling, but he had something to say but he didn't say it. I looked at his eyes carefully, but couldn't tell whether he loved me or not, or whether he had loved me before or not. After a moment of silence, he reached out his long arm, took the gift box from the front passenger seat, and handed it to me. His cold anger disappeared, and his handsome face became gentle. Be good, put on your skirt, and let's go to Fulenman for dinner. He wanted to change the subject and give both of them a way out. I refused coldly. No need, since you've torn up the divorce agreement, and today is my birthday, I don't want my birthday to be unlucky. Let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow. He looked at me for a long time, then stood up, opened the gift box, took out the beautiful long dress from it, and sneered, You don't want to be a good wife, you don't want to live in a villa worth tens of millions, and you want to divorce me. Do you think you can support yourself after the divorce? Can you afford to wear this $1 million dress? Do you think it's that easy to go out and work? Do you know how many people's faces you have to look after when you start from the bottom? His words were full of contempt for me. This year I have indeed been dependent on him and have no value of my own. A surge of anger rushed to my head, and I angrily said, Yang Chen, do you think a woman can't live without a man? I would be blind to marry you, not disabled. What about a rich lady? A big villa? Don't you and your mother just treat me as a nanny? Other nannies also live in big villas and get paid. What about me? I'm just a free nanny. It was you who said that I was not allowed to work after we got married and that you would support me. It was your mother who didn't allow me to go out in public because she thought I was embarrassing. But what happened? I spent a little of your money, and she kept saying that I was eating and living for free and was spending her son's money. It's better to look at the faces of outsiders than your own faces. I am so unlucky to be your wife. I was close to a breakdown, and I shouted in a hoarse voice, From now on, I don't want to please anyone, I don't want to be submissive, I don't want to be looked down upon by your family, I don't want to be controlled by you, this kind of life is not what I want. Tears slowly overflowed from my eyes, blurring my vision. I suddenly smiled sadly. I have endured that kind of heart-wrenching pain and a zombie-like life with a smile on my face for a whole year. I looked at him, and his handsome face that made me cling to him day and night, and said in a soft but clear voice, I don't want to endure it anymore. His cheating only gave me the courage to leave. During this year, he was having a life of debauchery outside, and I was crying over and over at home. I also had to reflect on what I did wrong, but I was just deceiving myself. When love becomes useless, it should be discarded. Yang Chen stood there in a daze, looking at me with an indescribable complex expression in his eyes, which contained both astonishment and sadness. My tone was close to begging, can you let me go? Suddenly, he grabbed my jaw and said angrily, if I let you go, where are you going? To that bastard man. So this is how he thinks of me. I deliberately said, yeah, you're the only one who can find a cheap woman, right? His eyes were bloodshot and he was on the verge of losing his mind. The veins on the back of his clenched fists were clearly visible. I thought he was going to hit me, but in the end, he just punched the driver's seat in front of him. Then, out of nowhere, he said, you like me because of my name, right? I had no idea what he was saying. Just then, his phone rang. He didn't care about me and answered the call first. I took the opportunity to open the car door and ran away. I waved to stop a car and heard him say something to the phone in the back. What? My uncle is here? I'll go now. I sat in the car and asked the driver to go to Fu Lin Men. When the driver learned that I was going to Fulinman, he couldn't help but talk to me. Beautiful lady, are you going to Fulinman for dinner or just strolling around? I replied gently, let's go eat. He looked at me through the rearview mirror, a little surprised. I couldn't blame him for that. After all, I was dressed too simply, a light pink shirt, a white long skirt, and a small jacket. The whole thing cost only about 200 yuan. I didn't wear any jewelry, not even a bag. People who go to Fulinman to eat are either rich or noble, and of course they are low-key people. I am not low-key, but ordinary. The driver said with envy, it's expensive to eat there. I heard that one meal can cost me a month's salary, and that's even if there are no seats. I have to work harder to make money. I'll take my wife and daughter there once in the future. They will definitely be happy. I said, you can do it, come on. All those who work hard for their lives are valuable and deserve respect. When I got off the car, the fare was 7.7 yuan. I scanned the code and paid 10 yuan directly. The driver kept thanking me. I felt very warm that I received gratitude from a stranger just by giving him 2 more yuan. And what about Yang Zhan? I was sitting alone in the Prince Gong Hall, the largest and most luxurious in the entire Fulinman, feeling a little uncomfortable. I have been here many times, but this was my first time sitting in this private room. The entire private room is magnificent, luxurious and majestic, suitable for people in high positions. To be able to book this private room, one must be rich, have status and connections. I couldn't help but check the balance on my phone, which was 28,999. However, I did take the card Yang Yang gave me for emergencies. He's such a scumbag, what's wrong with me spending some of his money? I sent a few messages to Chen Ci first, and he replied that he was on the way. After waiting for about 10 minutes, Chen Ci and Yi Heng arrived. I immediately stood up and greeted them enthusiastically. Mr. Chen, Mr. Yi, you are here. Chen Ci smiled and said, Miss Jing, this is the case. Do you mind if I bring another friend to eat with me? Yi Heng touched his nose awkwardly. I smiled and said, of course I don't mind. He nodded, well, that's good, he will be here soon. After that, he handed me a gift, a limited edition luxury face cream worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was flattered and quickly refused. Mr. Chen, why are you giving me a birthday gift? It's so expensive, I can't accept it. I was also wondering why he would give me face cream. Chen Ci smiled and said, it's not expensive. My wife is not used to it, so I gave it to you. What's so valuable about him? He's so stingy. Yi Heng next to him also handed over a gift, an extremely exquisitely crafted rose watch inlaid with diamonds, worth $1 million. Chen Ci laughed, I am not as generous as you, Mr. Yi. The watch was bought from my own home. Yi Heng looked at me, with a gentle smile on his face, Ms. Jing, happy birthday. I hope you can accept this little gift from me. Actually, I only met them once, and they were the ones who helped me. Now I invited them to dinner, but they gave them such an expensive birthday gift. I was so shocked that I dared not accept it. Instead, I felt ashamed. After all, when I found out they had booked this private room, I was surprised why they booked such an expensive one. Just as I was trying to decline in various ways, a magnetic voice rang out. It was just two simple words, but it seemed to carry an irresistible command: take it. Chapter 13, We Are All Here to Eat, Why Bother Talking About Other People's Husbands? I looked towards the door and was stunned. The man wore a pearl white shirt with his sleeves rolled up to reveal his forearms, black casual trousers, and a mask. Even though he looked so casual and low-key, he still looked like he had walked out of a movie and had a unique aura. He was staring at me, his eyes were calmer and deeper than anyone I had ever seen, giving me an inexplicable sense of oppression. I still recognized him, the man who sent me back to Yihan's house a few days ago, Yang Zhan's uncle, Li Yang. How did he end up here? I stood there in a daze, looking at him in astonishment. Li Yang took off his mask and sat on the armchair at the center of the dining table. He put his arms on the armrests and crossed his long legs. His posture was extremely relaxed. There was a faint smile on his face. What? You don't welcome me? Then I'll leave. I said timidly, no. Chen Ci beside him said quickly, Ms. Jing, this is the friend I mentioned who came to eat for free. I clearly saw Li Yang give him a cold look, and Chen Ci shuddered all over, forcing a smile as he said, I don't need to introduce this person, my friend, your uncle. Originally, I asked you to treat me to a meal today. Since he happened to be with me, I asked him to come along. Otherwise, it would be so awkward. I was also planning to tell you on the way, but I didn't tell you in advance because I was afraid you would be nervous. You're surprised, aren't you? Look, he's surprised too. I didn't tell him on the way. I looked at Li Yang, he seemed calm and unperturbed. Chen Ci followed my gaze and looked at Li Yang, laughing, look at him, he is so surprised that he has no expression on his face. I was quite surprised. It turned out that the friend he was talking about was this person. Judging from the gifts they gave and the fact that he had such a friend, it was no wonder that he could easily book the largest private room here. Chen Ci suddenly said, you are all family anyway, you shouldn't mind, right? I came back to my senses, and smiled quietly and gently, I don't mind. Why would I mind? Last time, my uncle even sent me home. As for family, even if Yang Zhan and I don't divorce, he and I are not a family. Take the things. It's not worth much. Li Yang, who was sitting on the armchair, suddenly spoke. I smiled and said, it's really too expensive. If you don't accept it, it will be hypocritical. He seemed to be continuing what he was saying, but I interrupted him abruptly. When I heard this, I clasped my hands together and blushed. How could someone be so eager to give me a gift and force me to accept it? Chen Ci spoke again, yes, Miss Jing, just accept it. I didn't expect that we were so destined to meet. I originally wanted to have a meal together, and we chose to have it on your birthday. The fate between people is really so complicated and confusing, har har. He seemed to deliberately put emphasis on the words puzzling and confusing. Besides, we are grown men and we can't come to dinner empty-handed. After saying that, he glanced at Li Yang. I was quite nervous and didn't think too much about what he meant. I just reached out and put away their expensive gifts and placed them on the shelf next to me. At this time, two palace maids in Manchu costumes came in. They first served some exquisite palace snacks, and then took out the food stand and asked about ordering. This made me a little confused. I didn't know whether to let Chen Ci and Yiheng order first, or let Li Yang order first, or should I arrange it myself. Just when I was in a dilemma, Li Yang suddenly said, order whatever you want to eat. After hearing this, Chen Ci also said to me, yes, today is your birthday, just order whatever you like, don't worry about us, we three grown men can eat anything. I smiled warmly, how can this be? You helped me last time, so this time I'm treating you to a meal. You're the guests, so you have to order the food. Just order whatever you want. Yiheng, who was standing next to him, put down the teacup he had just picked up and said slowly, you are so polite. How about I have some? 4 classic dishes, plus a bowl of longevity noodles. Li Yang spoke lazily without even looking at the menu. I turned my head slightly to look at Yiheng, thinking that he would be embarrassed, but he still had a warm and kind smile on his face. He just sat there casually, giving people a feeling of integrity and nobility. Li Yang glanced at Chen Ci again. Just order a few dishes you like. Chen Ci didn't even look at the menu, and said with a smile, shredded pork with lettuce, sea bass soup with shredded ginger, fried shrimp with garlic moss. They are all my favorites. I remember that he likes the same dishes as me. However, these 3 dishes are the cheapest here, and they don't seem to be suitable for serving to guests. The 4 classic dishes are the signature dishes here: truffle stewed chicken, crispy roast duck, steamed sori, and pork with mashed garlic. Each dish costs more than 1,000 yuan. Li Yang glanced at Yiheng again. Yiheng smiled and said, "Then I'll have a pussy." Li Yang suddenly interrupted him, "Forget it, it's enough to eat, that's all." Yiheng. Is this not very polite? But it seems that they have a good relationship. Chen Ci and Yiheng don't look angry at all. Instead, they show strange smiles. Chen Ci coughed lightly and asked tentatively, "Would you like to order a bottle of wine? Yuanqing War Mao Tai is good." Yiheng had a meaningful smile on his handsome and elegant face. How could Yuan Qinghua Mao Tai be pleasing to Lao Li? Yamazaki 55 is barely acceptable. Although I don't know much about wine, I have seen the 2 types they mentioned. The first type costs 1 million, and the second type is over 5 million. I guess this meal will clean out the card that Yang Yang gave me. I'm here to eat, not to drink. Li Yang raised his eyelids slightly, his expression showed no emotion, but he said, "Rub," with confidence. Chen Ci and Yiheng were obviously stunned. He picked up an orange from the table and said sarcastically, "You two are thicker skinned than this orange." After saying that, he didn't bother to look at their expressions. He nodded to the waitress next to him, motioning her to prepare the dishes. Then he leaned back slightly in the armchair, playing with his mobile phone with a focused expression. I heard Chen Ci and Yiheng whispering to each other, "I really don't know who has the thickest skin." While waiting for the food, I was extremely reserved and didn't even dare to raise my head, because Li Yang was sitting right opposite me. Although his every move was elegant and noble, he also exuded a sense of intimidation. The tea artist came, and Li Yang asked the tea artist to go out and he made tea himself. I seldom drink tea, and when I do I just put tea leaves and pour water. However, the tea ceremony is profound and mysterious, and the art of tea is complicated and particular. People who know the art of tea are truly amazing. He sat upright at his desk with an upright posture and elegant demeanor. His handsome and deep eyes were shrouded in tea mist. If he were to wear ancient-style clothes, he would be a gentle and kind young man. At this moment, watching him brew tea skillfully, with elegant techniques and superb tea art, and every step was smooth and calm, I actually felt a visual enjoyment. Just as I was watching intently, Chen Ci suddenly asked me, "How is your head injury from last time? Is it healed?" He was obviously about 30 years old and looked gentle, but the smile on his face was as kind and amiable as an old man. I smiled and said, "Okay, nothing happened." He asked me again, "How did you plan your birthday today? What did you do after dinner? Didn't Yang Yang accompany you?" At this moment, I saw Li Yang suddenly raise his eyes. His dark eyes were deep and bright, and they met my gaze in mid-air. And I always felt that these eyes looked familiar, as if I had seen them somewhere. I slightly shifted my gaze and answered Chen Ci's question, "I don't have any plans. I'll go home after dinner." Very busy. No matter how busy you are, you have to spend your wife's birthday with her, don't you, Lao Li? Your nephew can't do that. Yiheng walked to the window and suddenly spoke again. He took a folding fan in his hand and opened it casually. His face was like white jade and he looked very elegant, but the words from his mouth inexplicably tasted of tea. "We are all here to eat, why bother talking about other people's husbands?" This time he did not raise his eyes, but lowered his eyebrows. He lifted the kettle high with his slender white fingers, and water poured into the teapot from a high place, and the tea leaves rolled and scattered in the pot. Chapter 14. Which bastard are you going to have dinner with? Yiheng was not angry. His eyes were gentle and bright. He walked towards me at a leisurely pace and said, "Look how distant your uncle is from you. You should get closer to him in the future." I smiled but said nothing. Li Kaiman hated Li Yang's mother almost as much as she hated me, so how could she possibly get close to her? Besides, I was going to divorce Yang Zhan, and would have nothing to do with this uncle in the future. Li Yang is a bit like Yang Zhan, he is taciturn and doesn't like to talk much. Chen Ci was quite talkative, asking a lot of daily questions. At the end, he suddenly asked me, when I was a child, I had a brother who was very, very kind to me. Did you have any brothers when you were a child? Was your sister very kind to you when you were a child? His question reminded me of the orphanage. Many of the memories are vague, but I clearly remember that there was a brother who was very kind to me and would stand up to protect me when I was bullied. I treated him as the closest person in the world, and even said to him innocently, "Brother, when I grow up, I will be your wife, okay?" However, he later abandoned me, killed the loving Dean, and cut off all contact with me. Last I heard, he passed away. I didn't want to recall this painful memory, nor did I want to talk about it, so I smiled faintly and said, "No." Chen Ci obeyed, and for some reason he glanced at Li Yang, then smiled. "Is that so?" I also followed his gaze and looked at Li Yang. His eyes were slightly dim, and he pursed his lips. I couldn't understand his smile. Chen Ci suddenly changed the subject. "According to age, you should call me brother, but according to seniority, your uncle and I are friends, so you should call me uncle. I am not used to hearing you address me as Mr. Chen, so how about you call me? Just shout out your statement." Li Yang, who had been silent for a long while, suddenly spoke again. I was stunned when I heard that. Chen Ci nodded with a wry smile. "Yeah, just call me Chen Ci, it's a good name, and my name sounds nice too, it's the same as the word in poetry. This guy's name is also Yiheng." He tapped Yiheng with his chin. "Just call me by my name." Yiheng smiled at me. I don't know what's going on, but as long as Li Yang is around, I always feel a little nervous and can't relax, so I found an excuse to go out and make a phone call. All I met along the way were palace maids and guards in Manchu clothing who walked gracefully and with proper etiquette. When they saw me, they all bowed and said, "Good luck to you." I walked on the corridor, looking at the familiar scene in front of me, and remembered that Yang Yang brought me here to eat before. I suddenly got my period, and he immediately ran out to buy me sanitary napkins. He bought daily and nighttime supplies, as well as my favorite brand. He even thoughtfully asked the waiter to prepare a bowl of red dates, longans and brown sugar water for me. He even bought me some underwear. I thought of Li Kaiman's words again. He planned to cancel their wedding with me the day before the wedding. I could understand that he just wanted to have fun and didn't really want to marry me. But after marrying me, he could only treat me coldly. It turns out that people can really pretend to love you very much, even the details can be faked. I wonder if I can pretend not to love him in the future. Suddenly, a familiar and cold voice sounded from behind. "Why are you here?" I turned around and saw Yang Zhan. He stepped closer, his eyes fixed on me coldly. "I asked you to come here for dinner, but you refused to come. So you have an appointment." I didn't intend to pay any attention to him and just walked past him. But he grabbed my arm and looked at me sideways. "Are you dating a woman or a man?" I frowned and said, "It has nothing to do with you." His tone was teasing. "How come I don't know that my wife has other friends besides Yihan?" He then asked, "So, who did you ask out? Or who asked you out? You didn't want to spend your birthday with your husband, but went out to celebrate with someone else, right?" I stared at him with slightly angry eyes. "So, on our wedding anniversary, you didn't spend it with your wife, but ran out in the middle of the night to spend it with a female internet celebrity, right?" He didn't expect me to fight back like this. After all, I had always been gentle and submissive to him before. He frowned and looked surprised. "You have become more and more eloquent these days." I was too lazy to pay attention to him and shook off his hand. His tone suddenly became doting again. "Be good, stop making trouble. If you want to come here to eat, I will accompany you. I will order you a table full of your favorite food, but I have something to do now, so you go to Fudu Hall first." There was a strong bitterness in my heart. During the days when I filed for divorce, he suddenly showed his affection to me several times. However, I did not waver at all and said indifferently, "You asked me if I was dating a man or a woman. Since I came here, I must have a date and a private room. Why would I go to Mr. Yang's room?" After hearing this, he frowned and said, "So, who did you meet?" I really wanted to say that I was dating your uncle, but I held back and smiled. "It has nothing to do with you." I took a step forward, but he stopped me, his handsome face covered with a layer of coldness, as if to ask, "Tell me, is it a man or a woman?" "Yang Zhan. Just then, a shrill voice interrupted. Soon a gorgeous figure came over, with big wavy hair, fiery red lips, a pair of big earrings, and a pair of high heels. My eyes fell on the dress she was wearing, a lustrous red satin haute couture dress with a full drape, flowing texture, and pleated design, which was romantic and lively. It's exactly the same as the skirt I cut into pieces a few days ago. Actually, I don't like red, but in order to give Yang Zhan a surprise and show him a different me, I spent several million to order a skirt, and planned to wear it on our wedding anniversary. This is the skirt that Ying Chen had customized for me, and it was also the one he gave me this morning. The funny thing is, it is now worn on her body. I was so angry that my heart was in a state of panic and my steps were shaky. But I stubbornly straightened my back and smiled. I dated the men and you dated the women, so we're even. Yang Chen stared at me with gloomy eyes. It was Bo Mayer who spoke first, in a very coquettish tone. Yang, you've been out for a long time. As if he didn't see me. I clenched my hands, my nails digging into my palms. I couldn't understand why he brought this woman here, and I couldn't understand why he let her wear the skirt he gave me. How cruel is his heart? He stabbed me like this. Bo Mayer looked at me, and a smile appeared on her red lips. Hey, Jingshu, why are you here? Their tone was surprised yet relaxed, as if they were a couple who accidentally met a stranger like me. It really makes me want to laugh. My husband doesn't want to divorce me, but he brings his lover out for dinner. The two of them are so affectionate that I, his original wife, feel uncomfortable. It felt like I had swallowed snake gall, and it was so bitter that it made me feel sick. My face must have been extremely pale at this time, but I still managed to smile and asked, "Excuse me, why can't I be here? Is this your business?" Chapter 15, Bo Mayer, which club do you work in? There were cracks on her delicate makeup, and soon she pretended to apologize. Don't be angry, what I meant was that Yang Chen told me that you were not coming here to eat and rejected him. I'm surprised that you are here again. My eyes fell on her skirt again. The skirt was my size, but it was obviously a lot smaller for her figure with big breasts and a round butt. However, she still wore it and it was very tight and constricting. How could her breasts be willing to be oppressed? They directly propped up the cloth, like two heavy balls. She followed my line of sight and looked down at herself, then took a few steps towards Yang Chen and said in a coquettish voice, "Hey, I'm wearing your skirt, you won't be angry, will you?" I smiled and said, "How can I be angry if you pick up the trash I don't want and wear it?" Her smile was stiff, and her semi-permanent long eyelashes kept blinking, as if she was trying to hide her anger. She looked at Yang Chen. "Yang Chen, why did you give me the rubbish that your wife doesn't want?" Disgusting. It's quite disgusting. I took a step forward and stood beside her. My tone and expression showed obvious disgust. If you pick something up, it doesn't suit you. The $1 million haute couture dress looks tacky on you. But your husband said it looks good. She was a little angry and almost couldn't hold it in. Her expression was fierce and her voice became much higher, attracting the attention of several passers-by. You may not know him. Ever since he got married, his taste has been very bad. My voice was neither too high nor too low, and was elegant and graceful, with a faint smile on my face. After saying that, he left quickly. Bo Mayer's voice came from behind. Your wife doesn't seem angry at all. Jing Shu. Yang Zhan took a few steps forward and stopped me again. He stared at me. Don't you want to hear an explanation? Don't you want to know why the dress that belongs to you is on her? I really want to, but no matter what the explanation is, even if Bo Mayer forced it on him, or begged him with tears, or even threatened him with his life, I think he is unforgivable. So, I said, I don't want to. His face was cold. You are not angry at all. My chest was stuffy, but I tried my best to slow down my breath, saying calmly, what's there to be angry about? You're just giving my unwanted garbage to a beggar to wear. I'm not a saint, how can I not be angry? If this happened to a normal person, they would be angry, right? But he just asked this question, which was quite ridiculous. He didn't say anything, just kept staring at me, which made me feel a little nervous. At the beginning, I was just your second choice, right? He asked this question out of nowhere and I was a little confused. Bo Mayer next to her interrupted again in a coquettish voice. I feel that you are quite hostile to me, Jing Shu. Actually, I am here this time just to apologize for bullying you back then, and... She said frankly, don't think too much, I'm not interested in your husband, I'm just an ordinary friend, and I just happened to be a newly signed artist in his company. She paused for a few seconds, raised her chin high, split her red lips, and smiled nonchalantly. Oh, you are just too sensitive and suspicious. If I was really interested in your husband, I would have taken action long ago, and you would have nothing to do with it. It's good that you took action early. It has nothing to do with me. I smiled and said in a steady tone, I get your bitch irritation. The resentment on her face flashed away, she bit her lip in grievance, her eyes moistened. We are all women, why do you like to engage in female competition? I replied, don't put the blame on me. She pouted, lowered her head, and whispered softly, you know whether you have done anything female or not. I looked at Yang Zhan, his tall and slender body blocking me, his eyebrows and eyes dark, his face cold. He had no intention of joining in the argument. It seemed as if he had tacitly agreed whether I was a female competitor or not. I laughed out loud and raised my lips. She is competing for favor like this, why don't you divorce me and marry her home? I don't want to be forced by her to play the role of a female rival. After saying that, I pushed him away and walked away. He asked, where are you going? I paused and said, your question is really funny. Of course I'm going to have dinner with the man I'm dating. Didn't you also have a date with a woman? His dark eyes darkened and he stared at me angrily. Who did you meet? It's none of your business. A gloom suddenly appeared on his face. He grabbed my arm again, his eyes cold and deep, threatening. Why don't you go find that wild man and try? Are you scolding me? It was still that magnetic and textured voice, but a little colder. Li Yang walked out from the corner of the corridor, holding the phone to his ear in one hand and a cigarette in the other. He didn't look at us, but said to the phone, why are you scolding me? I'm not a scumbag. Hang up. After saying that, he put his phone in his pocket, raised his head and looked in my direction, paused for a moment, curled his lips and asked, why haven't you come in for so long? The food has been served inside. He said this to me. Yang Chen was obviously startled and shocked. He quickly let go of my arm and called out respectfully, Uncle. After shouting, he looked at me with surprise. He must have been very curious why I was having dinner here with my uncle. Of course, he was also embarrassed because the wild man he was talking about was his uncle. I walked up to Li Yang, my body tense, not knowing if he heard me mentioning the man I made a date with. Li Yang stood still, glanced at Jing Chen calmly, then turned his gaze to Bo Mayer and asked, which club do you work in? After hearing this, Bo Mayer's eyes widened and her face turned red and white. Did some vulgar fellow bring you in? Li Yang spoke again. I secretly glanced at Yang Zhan. The corners of his lips twitched noticeably and his face looked very ugly. What do you mean? You called me a lady? How can you be so disrespectful? And I was brought here by President Yang. She seemed to feel that she had Yang Chen's support, and puffed out her chest with pride. Shut up. The person who shouted was Yang Zhan, and it was obvious that he was angry. Bo Mayer was so frightened that her whole body trembled. It seemed that her mind had come to a point. Her eyes widened. Little, uncle, you are President Li. She immediately put away her harsh expression, pursed her red lips, and said in a much gentler tone, it turns out to be President Li. I didn't expect to have the honor of meeting you here. But President Li, you misunderstood. I'm not a lady from a club. My name is Bo Mayer. Her beautiful eyes moved with pride. I am a big internet celebrity, the one with 5 million fans, who works out. Li Yang's expression was calm, without much ups and downs. He just broke the cigarette between his fingers and threw it into the trash can beside him. He said slowly, I also forgot to check the almanac before going out. Chapter 16, A Noble Status Without Noble Character. My heart skipped a beat. Did he hear everything? He was clearly insulting Pamia, but I felt embarrassed and my cheeks were burning. Bo Mayer's expression froze. She glanced at Yang Chen, as if asking for help, but Yang Chen didn't even look at her. At this time, several security guards dressed as guards came over, and one of them said in a serious tone, Miss, our boss said that you are not welcome here, please leave immediately. Bo Mayer smiled awkwardly, Boss Li, you won't really. You're not going to kick me out yet. Li Yang gave the order. Bo Mayer looked at Yang Chen for help again, but Yang Chen didn't say a word. She looked at me one last time. I smiled at her. She was extremely embarrassed, but this was not a place where she could afford to cause trouble, so she could only suppress her dissatisfaction in her heart and followed the guards out with gritted teeth. When he left, He looked back and his eyes were like those of a poisonous snake. I feel speechless. It was clearly her who wanted to interfere in our marriage. She was clearly the one who knew the truth, so why could she be so self-righteous? Are some people really shameless? Uncle, I just happened to be looking for you. As soon as Yang Yang opened his mouth, he was interrupted by Li Yang, who said sternly, "You have a noble status but no noble character. Get rid of the vulgar people around you before you come to discuss the project with me." After he finished speaking, he took the lead and walked towards Prince Gong Hall. I looked at Yang Zhan. His jaw was clenched, his eyes were dark, and there was some frustration and embarrassment on his face. "Why are you eating here with my uncle?" he asked me. I smiled faintly. "I don't need to explain to you, right? After a whole year of marriage, hasn't he ever explained anything to me?" I added, "I won't interfere in your affairs, and I also hope you won't interfere in my affairs." His voice suddenly softened, as if he was patient. "Okay, today is your birthday, I won't argue with you, go eat first, I'll wait for you outside." "No." I refused indifferently. "Does it have to be so cold?" he said. I found this sentence ridiculous. He was indifferent to me this year, verbal communication was reduced to a minimum, and I didn't even know what I did wrong. I endured the lingering pain in my chest, tried my best to control my emotions, and said, "The only topic we talked about was when to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get a divorce." "Jing Shu," he called me. I turned around and said, "My uncle is still waiting for me to eat." I walked all the way back to Prince Gong's hall. All the dishes on the table were ready. They were delicious and tasty, especially the hot bowl of longevity noodles, which was mouth-watering. Li Yang was still sitting on the armchair, drinking tea, holding the bowl holder in his left hand and picking up the tea lid with his right hand to push the tea leaves aside. He looked very relaxed, as if nothing had happened. Both the uncle and nephew have perfect appearance and structure, but one is captivatingly mature and steady, while the other is cold, arrogant, overbearing and paranoid. After I sat down, Chen Ci asked me why I had been out for so long. I smiled and replied, "Sorry, the call took a bit long." When Li Yang heard what I said, he looked up at me. This look made me very embarrassed. I lowered my head slightly, and for a moment I didn't know how to talk to him. "Do you want to apologize? The longevity noodles are getting cold, let's eat the noodles first." He suddenly spoke. After hearing this, I started to eat noodles with my chopsticks. The noodles were chewy, the soup was rich in flavor, and there was a poached egg on top. Even though I was in a bad mood, I still ate a lot of mouthfuls. Chen Ci next to me asked me, "How does it taste?" I praised, "It's delicious." I didn't expect that any bowl of noodles here would be so delicious. He laughed and said, as long as it tastes good, you can eat whatever you want in the future." I found this a bit strange and smiled. How can I come here every day just to buy a bowl of longevity noodles? Yi Heng said, "His wife can cook it. If you want to eat it, just go to his house." When I mentioned Chen Ci's wife, I smiled even more. "I knew your wife was a good cook last time, but I didn't expect that even noodles could be so delicious. She is amazing. When you have time, you can go and ask him for advice," Yi Heng said. Chen Ci was obviously panicked, and he laughed and said, yes, you can ask for advice. When she is free and you are free, you can meet in person." I felt like he wasn't too willing to do it, and although I was grateful and admired him, I wouldn't really bother him, right? I said yes verbally, but I wouldn't really go. After finishing the longevity noodles, we started our meal. The three dishes, shredded pork with lettuce, sea bass soup with shredded ginger, and fried shrimp with garlic moss, seem a little different from what I had at Fulinman before, but I can't tell how. But they are all delicious. The taste is a bit like the one Chen Ci bought last time. During the whole meal, except for Li Yang who kept silent, Chen Ci and Yi Heng were very cheerful and friendly. I was not that nervous and ate with them happily. In fact, no matter how happy you appear on the surface, you are still bitter in your heart. If it weren't for them, I think I would have burst into tears after what happened just now. I never expected that while he said he had booked a private room for my birthday, he also brought Bo Mayer along. Even his uncle could see what kind of person she was and could reject her, so why couldn't he, my husband, do the same? "Jing Shu! Jing Shu!" Chen Ci shouted twice before I came to my senses. "Today is my birthday, and the two of them wanted to wish me a happy birthday with tea instead of wine. I picked up the teacup and said, "Thank you." To my surprise, Li Yang also picked up the teacup. "Why? You don't like tea?" Seeing that I was stunned, he looked up and asked me. I took a sip and it tasted mellow and sweet. Although I don't know how to taste tea, I thought it tasted better than any tea I had had before. The meal was almost over, so I found an excuse to go out, actually just to pay the bill. I estimated it to be around 40,000 or 50,000 yuan. After all, I didn't order any wine. If I had ordered any wine, it would have cost several million yuan, and I would definitely have to use Yang Zhan's card. I can afford 30 or 40,000, so I can use it. Finally, the front desk told me that the money had been settled, a total of 55,000. I was shocked. I didn't come to settle the bill. Who did it? The front desk said it was a guest inside. I returned to Prince Gong's hall and looked at Li Yang. He was just sitting there casually, exuding a sense of nobility. He suddenly said, "Go pay the bill." I took a few steps forward and asked, "Uncle, did you pay the money?" "Chen Si," I said, "it's just a few small coins. Your uncle is worth hundreds of billions. Besides, how can the elders let the younger generation pay for the meal together?" Yi Heng also said, "It's embarrassing for him to come and eat for free, so just give it to him. Just consider it as your pocket money." I hurriedly said, "Today is my birthday, and I'm the one treating you guys to dinner. How can I let my uncle give it to me?" "Uncle, let me transfer the money to you." "They are right." His expression remained calm and his tone was casual. Chapter 17. Please help me send my wife home. I still want to speak. He suddenly spoke again. "You two, why don't you leave now that you're full? Do you still want to eat dinner here?" Yi Heng and Chen Si were originally sitting comfortably in their seats. When they heard this, Chen Si stood up first, with a more respectful look. Yes, I'm full, it's time to go." Instead, Yi Heng stood up slowly and smiled at me gently. "Thank you, niece, for treating us to dinner today. We had a great time." I smiled sheepishly. How can it be considered as my treat? The money was paid by my uncle. It doesn't matter what he gives you. He winked at me. I always feel something strange when I hear this. Li Yang has already walked out of the private room. I picked up the birthday present they gave me, walked a few steps forward, looked at his tall and slender back, and wanted to say thank you several times, but the words never came out. The aloof and cold aura he exuded made me very cautious and I didn't dare to talk to him easily. Yi Heng and Chen Si did not follow me out of Fulinman, but said that they had friends in other private rooms. They went over to say hello and when they said goodbye to me, they asked Li Yang to take me home. It was cloudy outside, and the sky was filled with thick, low, turbid clouds that seemed to be pressing down and making it hard to breathe. A car was parked at the door. The driver got out and opened the door respectfully. This driver looked familiar. He was the driver who drove me home last time. "It's going to rain heavily. I'll take you back." Li Yang spoke to me. But my eyes were looking not far away, where Yang Chen was leaning against the car door smoking. He was really waiting for me. When he saw me coming out, he threw away his cigarette butt and walked over. He first called out to Li Yang respectfully, then said to me, "I'm waiting for you. Have you finished eating? Let's go home." He came forward and held my hand. I took a few steps back, looking indifferent. "No need, I'll take my uncle's car." He stared at me with his dark and cold eyes. "My car is next to me, waiting for you to come home, so don't bother my uncle, he is very busy, don't be so ignorant." "No trouble." The person next to him spoke lazily. I was slightly startled and turned my head to look at him. He put his hands in his pockets, and said in a gentle and amiable manner, "I don't have anything to do today, so I'll just drop you off. Aren't you worried about your partner suddenly cancelling the contract? Go and do your thing." Yang Chen frowned slightly, his eyes darkened. "How?" Li Yang looked at him. He smiled and said, "Then please help me send my wife home, thank you." Actually, I didn't really want to ride in Li Yang's car, but now that I had said it, I had no choice but to get in. Li Yang got into the car just as it started to rain. The raindrops fell down like beans being sieved, hitting the ground and splashing water. As the car was moving, I couldn't help but look back at Yang Zhan. He was still standing there, with his hands hanging down, letting the rain fall on his body, wetting his hair and clothes. Memories emerged. When I was 18 years old, he also stood in the heavy rain in order to pursue me. I withdrew my gaze and quietly looked at the heavy rain outside the window, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. A deep and clear voice sounded in my ears. Are we still going to the Guyuan community next to Nanyang Avenue and the first bridge? I turned to look at him. Go to Panchi Street. I looked around for a long time on 58.com last night. Panchi Street has developed business and a bustling street. Even though the house prices are expensive, almost all the houses are rented out. Fortunately, I found a house in the back that I was quite satisfied with. Although it is a private house and the environment is average, it is close to the piano store and the price is not expensive, 1,800 a month. I plan to go look at houses and sign contracts today. Just then, the landlord called me. I answered the phone and he told me, I'm sorry, Ms. Jing. My son and daughter-in-law suddenly came back from abroad. The house we agreed with you has to be kept for them. I said gently, it's okay, I'll look for it again. After hanging up the phone, I glanced at Li Yang. He must have heard it and probably knew that Yang Zhan and I had a conflict. Li Yang suddenly turned to look at me, his eyes were deep and clear, and his beautiful lips opened. Are you renting a house? I nodded. Well, the landlord just called and said that his son and daughter-in-law are back, so. He retracted his gaze and said calmly, I happen to have a house over there, you can stay there. The meaning is very clear. During the two encounters, his behavior surprised me. He was gentlemanly, polite, friendly and enthusiastic to me, but I only benefited from Yang Zhan's kindness. Since I have chosen to divorce Yang Zhan, and the person next to me is also his uncle, I must avoid him and must not accept his help every time. I took a deep breath and said directly, actually, Yang and I are planning to divorce. He paused, then turned his eyes to look at me again, his deep gaze falling on my face, as if examining the truthfulness of my words. His slender white fingers were crossed on his legs, and his thumbs were rubbing against each other. If he hadn't looked so calm, I would have thought he was nervous about something. You saw it at Fortune House today, and you must know that he and I are not on good terms now. In fact, I was discussing divorce with him a few days ago. I said again. So? He asked in a low voice. I said, since I am divorcing him, he and I will be strangers from now on, and I don't want to have any contact or involvement with him anymore. It was obvious that she didn't want to accept his help. He was silent for a few seconds and said one word, okay. I thought he would curiously ask me why I got divorced, what happened, and what happened today, but he suddenly said, then don't call me uncle from now on, call me by my name. The tone of his voice was very calm, without any ups and downs. I was stunned for a moment and mouthed, Li Yang. He responded calmly. I thought about the meal money he paid for me, and said, can you log into your Alipay account? I'll transfer the money to you. His tone was a little colder. I am willing to spend the money, there is no reason to take it back. He stopped talking after that, and the car fell into silence. No one knew when the rain outside stopped. It was a bit stuffy, so I rolled down the window and looked outside. On the sidewalk, I saw a loving couple. The boy was putting away an umbrella, and it was obvious that most of his body was wet. The girl took out a tissue and wiped his face. Just like me and Yang Zhan in the past. At that time, his heart and eyes were also filled with me, gentle and delicate. Can a man really go from loving someone very much to not loving them anymore? Or maybe he never really loved me, he just wanted to conquer me. The more he couldn't get the love, the more he wanted it. After all, I rejected him before. Now that he has it, he doesn't cherish it. Even if I am as docile as a cat, he still dislikes me for shedding hair. Li Yang asked, is it still Panchi Street? I said, let's go back to my bestie's house. I felt physically and mentally exhausted, and my heart was aching, so I didn't want to go anymore. I just wanted to lie on the bed and sleep. He said to the driver in front of him, Lao Ju, Guyuan community next to Nanyang Avenue and Ichiao. He remembered the address very clearly. Chapter 18, Yihan's mother-in-law. When I got to Guyuan community, I got off the car. The cold air after the rain hit my whole body. My thin body couldn't help but tremble slightly. I said to him, thank you. I'll go upstairs then. He nodded slightly in response. When I turned to leave, I suddenly heard him say, it's cold, wear more clothes. I looked back at him, but the car had already driven away. Although the tone was very plain, I was still quite touched. Maybe because I had seen too much indifference, I felt warm in my heart when someone suddenly showed me care. I happened to meet Yihan, who was taking a walk in the community. She was sweating all over and her face was very pale. She said to me, "I am so tired. I have been walking here for more than 2 hours. My mother-in-law said that I must walk for 3 hours before I can go up." I held her hand, my face full of heartache. "Be good, let's go upstairs." Zhang Suifang was stewing chicken soup in the kitchen when she heard the noise and ran out, asking, "It's been less than 3 hours. Why are you back? You need to exercise more so that you can have a normal birth." I said, "Auntie, Yihan has only been pregnant for half a month, and the doctor said that she is weak and needs to lie down and rest more." She was obviously unhappy. "Don't I know this? You should exercise more when you are pregnant. It's good for your body and the baby." In our countryside, pregnant women still work in the fields. No one takes a break. I patiently said, "This cannot be generalized. It depends on the specific situation of the pregnant woman. If she is in good health, she can take a walk or exercise appropriately. If she is not in good health, she should rest more. If she does not rest well, it will not be good for the fetus. You definitely don't want your grandson to be in trouble, right?" She glared and said, Par, what are you talking about?" After that, he muttered, "You are so young, and you do nothing every day, just enjoy yourself at home. Why is your health not good?" Yihan lowered his head after hearing this. I was so angry that I said to her, "Auntie, why is Yihan enjoying herself at home? Your son opened a small company, and they worked hard together. She has been too busy these years and her health is not good. It was your son who asked her to rest at home. Besides, weren't you the one who kept calling your son and asked Yihan to stay at home to prepare for pregnancy?" She was very angry after hearing this, but she also felt that she was wrong, so she turned around and laughed. My, I speak directly, and I don't have any bad intentions. Yihan, don't take it to heart." Then he looked at me and said, "You're not going to stay for dinner, are you? I've packed your things for you. Please be careful when you rent a house by yourself." Only then did I realize that she had packed my things and thrown them next to the living room door. After seeing this, Yihan angrily accused, "Mom, you are going too far." Zhang Suifan said innocently, "How did I go too far? Didn't I just help her pack her things out of kindness?" Yihan was obviously very angry, and his tone became much heavier. "You are clearly trying to kick her out. I told you that Jing Shu also has a share of this house. She can live here as long as she wants. She is the most important person to me, and you have no right to treat her like this." After hearing this, Zhang Suifang untied her apron and threw it on the ground. She sat down on the sofa and wiped her tears. "This is too harsh. It will be hard to hear anyone who hears it. I am your mother-in-law after all. You are talking as if I am an outsider." She took out her cell phone from her trouser pocket and said, "Okay, I'll call my son and tell him that I'm going back to the countryside now and I can't serve you anymore." Yihan was shaking with anger and stepped forward. "Mom, we need to be reasonable, and you shouldn't call him for everything." Zhang Suifang dialed the number and put it to her ear. Yes, I am unreasonable. I am just a country girl. I shouldn't have come to the big city with good intentions to serve you. I am just an outsider." After that, she got up and went to the kitchen with her phone. Yihan's eyes turned red with anger. She is pregnant and has a special body condition. She can't bear this kind of bullying, so I smiled and said, "Okay, it's okay. I have already rented a house. It's very nice. I am planning to come and pack my things. Even if your mother-in-law doesn't come, I will live with you when your husband comes home. I don't think it would be awkward for me to do that." I comforted her again. "Although you two have different values, as long as she is truly kind to the baby in your belly, that's all that matters." Yihan looked at me with an apologetic look on his face, choking with sobs. "You were so miserable and helpless at that time. I should have stayed by your side all the time. I should have let you feel the warmth of home, and this home could have been your last harbor, but in the end, when I left, I couldn't help crying. I seldom cry normally, but maybe I was really lonely and helpless at that moment. I was planning to book a room at a hotel first and then slowly look for another house. At this time, a WeChat message came to my phone. It was a message from Chen Ci. "I heard from your uncle that you want to rent a house in Pancha Street. It just so happens that I have a vacant house over there. I have always wanted to rent it out to make some pocket money. Why don't you rent it? 1,000 yuan a month. I was in a hurry to rent a house and rejected Li Yang because he was Yang Zhan's uncle and he always gave me a sense of oppression. Mr. Chen is different. He is warm, cheerful, and approachable. Besides, I owe him a favor, so it is difficult to refuse him. I typed, "Thank you." He replied, "Where are you?" "I'll drive to pick you up, I'm just outside." I sent my address. When Chen Ci drove over, he had already changed into a business suit, as if he had just rushed over from the company. He took me to the famous water park next to Panchi Street. I asked in surprise, "Aren't we going to your house? Why did you take me to the water park?" He pointed to the Pingshu area across the street. "That's it." So Chen's statement was that the house was a large flat, and the location and view were top-notch, and the monthly rent was at least over 100,000 yuan, but he had said 1,000 yuan a month before, so I thought it was an ordinary house. Chen Ci smiled and said to me, "I have asked someone to come in and clean it in advance. I guarantee it will be spotless." I followed him to their house, which was on the 10th floor and covered an area of about 350 square meters. The floor-to-ceiling glass windows allowed me to overlook the entire water park at will. 5 bedrooms, 2 living rooms, 4 bathrooms, silk and wool handmade carpets, brown wool sofas, platinum sand luxury stone coffee tables, amber vases. The entire material, layout, and decoration are timeless, classic, luxurious and simple. The grey theme color adds a touch of calmness to the space. I like this place very much. It is comfortable and cozy. It is not like Yang Zhan's villa, which is too gorgeous and luxurious. All the furniture inside is what Li Kaiman likes. Even the wedding house he and I choose has to be based on her preferences. The house is a little small, so you just have to make do with it. Chapter 19. Do you think your uncle is a good person? The voice of Chen Ci rang in my ears. I exclaimed, "This is still small, it's too big. I just want to find a random house to live in, it's not suitable for me to live here." He laughed and said, "There's nothing wrong with it. I've wanted to rent it out for a long time, but I haven't found a good tenant. I only have one request, you can't bring men in. It would be awkward for me to refuse again, so I said, but 1,000 a month is too little rent. How about I give you 10,000? It's very embarrassing. After all, my monthly salary is only 30,000 yuan, and I want to save more money to buy a house and bring my grandma to live with us." Chen Ci said, "How can a tenant like you raise the rent yourself?" I said 1,000 and it is 1,000. I kept it originally because I was afraid that no one would live there for a long time and it would be unpopular. I just happened to rent it out to make some pocket money. It's 1,000. Who made us so lucky to be together? A man of the opposite sex who is so nice to me after only meeting me twice makes me wonder if he has some thoughts. I asked, "Does your wife know? This matter must be approved by his wife." He called his wife in front of me and asked for her opinion. The voice on the other end was strange, sounding like both a man and a woman, and it seemed like the person was speaking in a low voice. "But you can't discriminate against other people's voices, right?" The other party agreed very readily and invited me to have dinner at her house when I was free. After Chen Ci left, I simply packed up my things and chose the second bedroom to sleep in a daze. In the evening, I woke up crying from the grief of my dream. My pillow was wet, but I couldn't remember clearly what I dreamed about. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and stared at the grey sky with lifeless eyes. I felt as if I had fallen into a whirlpool of pain. I struggled to get up and fell back into it again, over and over again, suffering endless torture. After a while, I picked up my phone, opened Douyin and searched for Premier's account. I was watching her videos like a voyeur, and it just so happened that she had posted a few new photos that were combined into a video. In the photo, she is sitting in a high-end cafe drinking coffee with a middle-aged woman who is dressed elegantly. Both of them are smiling and seem to be having a very pleasant chat. And this middle-aged woman was Yang Zhan's mother, my mother-in-law, Li Kaiman. Their mother-in-law is drinking coffee outside with her son's lover. This was so funny, but I just smiled. After all, I was not surprised that Li Kaiman found her. I was just surprised that they got along so well. Li Kaiman has a strong possessiveness over Yang Zhan. She wants to arrange everything and have everything under her control. I had only known Yang Chen for less than 10 days when she came to my house and warned me, "You and my son are not from the same world. I warn you to stay away from my son." It was also this time that I learned Yang's true identity. Later, I started dating Yang Chen, and she invited me to a coffee shop. She didn't smile like in the photo that Bo Mayer posted, but said sarcastically, "You are just a slut. You are not worthy of my son. You are with him just for fame and fortune. I advise you to leave my son as soon as possible." I thought she would throw out a check worth millions like in most novels, but in the end, she didn't even pay for the coffee, and left with one sentence: "Want to marry into a wealthy family?" No way. Maybe she knew that Bo Mayer and Yang Zhan were together earlier than I did. Logically speaking, she would look down on internet celebrities. In her mind, only the daughter of a wealthy family who is of equal status to hers is worthy of her son. When she was in high school, Bo Mayer's mother opened a plastic surgery hospital. She was the only student in the school who had a driver to pick her up and drop her off after school. She was the boss in the school and almost all her classmates tried to please her. Later she went to study abroad and even changed her name. However, her family was only considered wealthy, much inferior to the Yang family. As for Lee Kaiman's nice attitude towards her, it was quite unexpected. People in the comment area were praising her, and one comment received more than 100,000 likes. "This auntie looks so noble, she must be a wealthy lady. Is Yaya going to marry into a wealthy family? Is this your future mother-in-law?" Bo Mayer also replied with a smiley face. Most of the people in the comment section are ordinary people who don't know Lee Kaiman at all. Of course, Yang rarely shows up in public, doesn't like to be interviewed by the media, and hates the media paying attention to his family and private life. I think, with Lee Kaiman's help, she must be more confident in becoming the mistress, right? After turning off my phone, I planned to go out to buy some vegetables and cook for myself. I casually opened the refrigerator and unexpectedly found that it was full. Milk, fruits, vegetables, lean meat, and a few rows of eggs. The statement must have been prepared in advance. I took out my cell phone and sent a message: "Thank you for such thoughtful preparation." After sending the message, I cooked some noodles with egg and lean meat, but before I had taken a few bites, Yihan called me. "Jing Shu, Yang Chen is downstairs from my house. I told him that you have found a job and rented a house. He asked me where you live, but I didn't know. He asked me to call you over because he wants to discuss the divorce with you." When I was leaving, I remembered the ring he gave me and decided to return it to him. I arrived downstairs of Yihan's building and saw Yang Chen from afar. He was standing by the flower bed, his shoulder leaning against the lamppost, motionless, with a faint aura of loneliness emanating from him. It would have been better if I hadn't seen him. As soon as I saw him, an irresistible grief instantly hit me. Tears blurred my eyes. I reached out and wiped them hard, then put on a faint smile and walked away. "Take the ring back." I handed him the velvet jewelry box. He turned around and stood straight. His hair seemed to have grown longer and his jawline was thinner. Even so, he was still intoxicatingly handsome from any angle. I used to love staring at him, looking at him like I was infatuated, especially when his eyes were full of tenderness. I wanted to take my heart out and give it to him. The person I loved so much has now betrayed me. This kind of pain can only be understood by those who have experienced it. I looked away and spoke again. "Take it back, I don't need it anymore." Of course not. I didn't even have a wedding ring when I got married. Now I'm getting divorced. What's the point of giving me a ring? I prepared this before we got married, but I never gave it to you. His voice was hoarse, his lacquered eyes narrowed slightly, and he smiled at me. My heart was hit and it hurt even more. I clenched my hands silently and couldn't help asking, "So why didn't you give it to me when you got married?" He looked at me and said, "Anyway, this ring belongs to you." I didn't like his answer, so I stuffed the jewelry box into his hands. "Sorry, I don't want it. A belated ring is meaningless, and besides." I looked up at him and said in a distant tone, "We want to get a divorce. We will be strangers from now on." He didn't take the jewelry box, and it just fell to the ground. The ring fell out of it, sparkling, elegant and noble. It was one of the ones I had set my eyes on before. I looked away and said, "Didn't you say you were here to discuss divorce? Why are you having dinner at Fortune House with your uncle? When did you get in touch? Are you familiar with him?" He asked 3 questions in a row. I felt a headache after hearing this, and said impatiently, "None of this has anything to do with you. What kind of good guy do you think he is?" Chapter 20. Even if I die, you will have to remain a widow. He stared at me with a stern expression and his tone was like a growl. "That's better than a scumbag like you." I couldn't help but yell at him. He was stunned for several seconds, almost gritting his teeth, and said, "Don't forget, he is my uncle. You'd better stay away from him." I found it funny and smiled. So what? He's your uncle, so what? He sent me home twice, and he also paid for Fulenman's meals. Do you think you can make him treat me as a stranger in the future? I had originally planned to avoid contact with Li Yang as much as possible in the future, and I said this in anger, but I suddenly felt good after saying it. He was so angry that he reached out and pinched my shoulder, saying, "So, you deliberately got close to him? You went to him immediately after divorcing me, firstly to use him as a backer, and secondly to use him to irritate me. Jingshu, why didn't I realize that you had this intention before? Aren't you usually so docile and obedient?" After saying that, he suddenly sneered and said, "Aren't you going to find a bastard? Why do you want to have two relationships at the same time?" I didn't quite understand what he meant, so I said angrily, "Mr. Yang, get a divorce quickly. Divorce me and marry that green tea bitch home quickly. Doesn't your mother like her very much? If she enters your home, your whole family will be very happy." His dark eyes stared at me intently, and he said coldly, "You want a divorce, but I won't. Even if I die, you'll have to remain a widow." I also stared at him, "Then I will file for divorce. It usually takes 3 to 6 months to file for divorce. Do you think it will work?" He didn't panic, but instead curled his lips sarcastically. "I know he has power advantages and I have nothing, so how can I possibly succeed in the lawsuit?" I don't know if it was because I was angry with him or because of his cruelty, but tears suddenly welled up in my heart. I quickly lowered my head and reached out to wipe away my tears. "Come home with me." His tone suddenly softened. I refused coldly, "No." He suppressed his anger and said, "You are used to living in a big villa, wearing luxury clothes, shoes, jewelry and bags, and living a life of luxury every day. Now you work from 9 to 5, get a Weibo salary, and have to look after your colleagues and boss. Can you bear this kind of life? Isn't it good to be supported by me?" I took a breath, looked at him, and smiled happily. Not only can I bear it, I also like this kind of life. I don't have to eat cold meals waiting for you to come home. I don't have to stay up until midnight every day waiting for your good night. I don't have to get up at 5 or 6 every morning to serve your mother, and I don't have to do endless housework. My life now is much more regular and easier than when I had you." I added, "As for the luxury you mentioned, everything I wear, including clothes, shoes, bags, and jewelry, all require your mother's approval. Have you forgotten that? I'm still pampered, I serve you as a nanny, and I don't sleep more than 7 hours a day. Is this what you call pampered?" I couldn't hold it back any longer, tears streaming down my cheeks. I choked and said, "It's good to be raised by you." "What's good about it?" "It's good to have no freedom. It's good to have no dignity." He was silent for several seconds, then said in a serious tone, "Come back with me, this won't happen again, I promise." He held me tenderly in his arms again, and said in a gentle and low voice, "I will not contact Bo Mayer in the future, and I will go home early, okay? Honey." In the first year of our marriage, he only uttered this name a handful of times. I felt bitter and sad, with love and hate mixed together. But, he and I can't go back. Even though I can forgive cheating because I'm in love, he shouldn't be getting together with the person who once bullied me. This is my bottom line. I pushed him away and raised my tearful eyes. "Yangjin, let's get a divorce. What do you want?" He stared at me with a pair of dark eyes, and his voice was close to a growl. I said, "Since we're not talking about divorce, I'll leave first." He bent down, picked up the ring and jewelry box on the ground, and carefully put the ring into the box. I turned and left. He suddenly carried me on his shoulders and walked out of the community as if he saw nothing. Several people on the road glanced at me and whispered about me. I struggled desperately. "Yangjin, are you sick? Put me down." He suddenly threatened me, "If you move again, we will stand in the middle of the road and see if a car will hit us to death." I was terrified. He was really paranoid and extreme sometimes. Just like when he proposed to me and Li Kaiman threatened him with death, he stood on the edge of the tall building and smiled. "Mom, jump, let's jump together." It was this time that Li Kaiman compromised. Finally, he forced me into the car at the entrance of the community, then he got in and locked the door. I was annoyed. "Yangjin, what are you doing?" He replied to me, "Of course I will go home with my wife." After that, he fastened my seat belt. I unfastened it, and he fastened it again. I unfastened it again. He didn't get angry, but just said quietly, "If you don't want to die, fasten it." He glanced in the rearview mirror. I found his words incomprehensible. Suddenly, he started the car, stepped on the accelerator to the bottom, and sped forward, overtaking all kinds of cars without even slowing down around the bends. I quickly grabbed the seat belt with my hands, my heart pounding. Just as I was about to call him a lunatic, I saw a car overtaking me recklessly and drifting in front of me. McLaren P1 sports car, fiery red, wild and cool. It made me shudder with fear. As Yang Zhan suddenly braked, my whole body leaned forward due to inertia, and then rebounded backwards, making me dizzy and nauseous. Yang turned on his turn signal, changed lanes, and said to me gently, "Don't be afraid." The car was obviously provocative. It also changed lanes and deliberately blocked the front, speeding up and slowing down, and kept honking the horn in an arrogant and domineering manner. Yang Chen remained expressionless and not angry, he just drove steadily to the suburbs. He saw that there were almost no vehicles on the road, so he pulled over and said to me, "You get out first." I was still a little surprised, but I was eager to get off the bus. As soon as I got out of the car, I saw him accelerate suddenly again and ram into their McLaren P1 sports car madly. I was so frightened that my face turned pale and I shouted, "Yang Zhan." Then, with a loud bang, the rear end of the McLaren P1 sports car was dented and was knocked more than 10 meters away. However, Yang Zhan didn't seem to intend to let it go, and continued to drive forward and push against the car. The man in front rolled down the window and began to shout for mercy, "Yang Zhan, I give in. I don't want to play anymore." I thought the voice sounded familiar, and wondered if it was Yang Zhan's good friend Hua Zheng, who was bohemian and cynical and went abroad to play racing a year ago. Yang Zhan drove his car backwards. I thought he would let Hua Zheng go after hearing this, but the next second, he stepped on the accelerator again and rushed forward once, twice, 3 times. My head was buzzing, my heart was in my throat, and I screamed, "Yang Chen, that's enough." He seemed to hear my voice and stopped. Hua Zheng also got out of the car in a panic and almost collapsed on the ground. He was obviously very angry and shouted, "Yang Zhan, you want to murder me? Is it necessary? I have already broken the beast's legs, isn't it enough? Besides, how would I know that he has done it before?" When he saw me, he stopped talking. Yang Chen ignored him and drove slowly in front of me. He said calmly, "Get in the car and go home." I was still in complete fear, my legs felt weak, and I was afraid that he would do something life-threatening again, so I obediently followed him into the car. He remained silent and said nothing, as if the thrilling scene just now had not happened. Instead, Hua Zheng behind him kept shouting, "Hey, you crashed my car and left me here alone. Chapter 21 If your mom hit me, I'll hit you." Arrived at Yang's villa. He parked his car at the door and made a phone call to have it towed away. Looking at the villa in front of me, I felt disgusted. However, the person who wanted us to divorce the most was Li Kaiman. Since he did not agree to divorce, let Li Kaiman force him to divorce. Li Kaiman happened to be walking her dog and had bought a new dog. When she saw me, she stared at me and asked, "Why is she back? This is her home, too." Yang Chen spoke in an indifferent tone and then pulled me into the villa. Li Kaiman quickly followed and said sarcastically, "Didn't someone send the divorce agreement to your home? Wasn't that pretty arrogant? How dare you go home now? Why? Are you still reluctant to give up your status as a rich lady?" I begged her to come back. Yang Chen stopped and stared at Li Kaiman with his dark eyes. Li Kaiman was obviously startled, but she didn't dare to confront Yang Chen directly. She smiled and said in her usual commanding tone, "Now that you're back, hurry up and cook." She picked up the new pet dog, sat upright on the sofa, and continued to instruct, "My stomach has been uncomfortable these days. I need to eat something light and easy to digest. Also, make me some red date and lotus seed soup." The new maid just walked in and said hurriedly, "Okay, I'll do it now." Li Kaiman raised her voice, which was sharp and thin, "Did I ask you to do it? Why don't you take my baby out for a walk quickly? Hold the leash tightly and don't let her bite me again." This was obviously referring to me. The maid glanced at me, then walked forward respectfully and held the pet dog. In the past, I would have obeyed her instructions and gone to the kitchen to cook dinner, and I would have done it seriously and attentively to please her. But now, why should I continue to serve her? If she is not allowed to do it, then who will do it? I looked at Lee Kaiman and asked. She didn't expect me to say that. She was stunned for a moment, then frowned and said loudly, "Of course you do it. Didn't you always cook before? Do you think I should do it?" I stared at her coldly. "If you want to eat, can't you do it yourself? Or have you become a rich lady for so long that your hands and feet are disabled?" When she heard this, she stood up suddenly, her face flushed with anger, and pointed at me. "Who are you scolding? Are you going crazy now? Huh? You used to be very good at pretending, but now you show your true colors. Yangjin, look at the kind of woman you married. I've said it before, she's just a wild chicken, she has no manners or upbringing at all. Mom." Yang Chen suddenly growled, frightening Li Kaiman so much that she trembled all over. His expression was sinister, and his voice was cold and low. "If you are really hungry, make it yourself, or go out to eat." This was the first time since they got married that he treated her mother so badly. In the past, no matter how his mother scolded me, he acted as if he didn't hear it. If the scolding was too intense, he would just leave. Then Yang Kaiman blamed me for not leaving her son at home. "Look at you, what's the use of you? Your husband comes home once every 3 or 4 days, and every time he comes back, you drive him away." Yang Kaiman froze in place, apparently stunned by the yelling. I looked at her, with the corners of my mouth raised in a smug smile. She was so angry that she was shaking all over and couldn't speak clearly. "Are you crazy? Are you crazy? I just asked her to cook a meal, why can't I do it? She is a daughter-in-law, it is natural for her to serve her mother-in-law." I said, "It is only natural for a son to serve his mother-in-law." After that, I looked at Li Yang and said in a commanding tone, "Why don't you go cook? Your mother will probably starve to death if she doesn't eat this meal." Li Yang's eyebrows were raised, and his dark eyes stared at me with a hint of depth. After a few seconds, his expression softened, and his tone was doting. "Okay, I'll listen to you, and I'll do it now." His answer surprised me so much that I stood there in a daze for a moment. Maybe it was because I was serious this time and determined to divorce him that he panicked. After all, I used to be the kind of person who would let others manipulate me, but now I am resisting. Li Kaiman never thought that I would let his son, whom he was so proud of, cook. What's more, his son was so obedient that she almost collapsed and yelled, "Stop right there, Yang Chen! Who are you? You are the CEO of a prestigious group. Why are you going to the kitchen? What are you cooking?" Yang Chen ignored her and went straight to the kitchen. Li Kaiman shouted at his back, "It is the rule of our Yang family that men don't enter the kitchen." Yes, the Yang family has always had such a strange rule that men are not allowed to enter the kitchen. I smiled and said, "Has your husband never been in the kitchen to cook for you? TSK, you are so pathetic. I know an old couple. Their husband is as valuable as your son. He and his wife have been in love for 50 years, but he never lets his wife enter the kitchen. Do you know why?" I smiled again, "Because of love." Before Li Kaiman got married, the Li family was just an ordinary business family. Later, she married into the Yang family, which in her words was marrying up. She was not liked by her in-laws or Yang Huogua. The reason why Yang Huogua married her was that she used despicable means to climb into his bed. So her life was not easy after she got married into her husband's family. Just like me this year, she was treated rudely and had no choice but to obey and endure. The difference might be that I loved Yang Zhan because I loved his family, but she was afraid of being kicked out of the house and not being able to enjoy the status of a wealthy wife. It was not until her parents-in-law passed away and her family became wealthy that she began to feel confident. Finally, when her husband died, she completely turned around and became the mistress of the house. I heard all this from the servant who served old Madame Yang. The servant in the latter position was directly dismissed by Yang Kaiman. My words hit Li Kaiman's sore spot sharply. She never got the love she longed for, and even lived a life with less dignity than me. She roared angrily, "You bastard, you bitch, you are not worthy of my son at all. Don't you think about your birth? You can marry my son and enjoy wealth and glory. You should have some self-awareness and serve us honestly. I asked you to cook, but you asked my son to cook. Why are you so lazy?" I was used to hearing her harsh words, so I didn't feel any big changes in my heart. But I would definitely criticize her when I needed to, and I would criticize her to the point of hurting her. "You know everything your mother-in-law said to you by heart, so." I deliberately chuckled, "Do you have to make me, your daughter-in-law, go through the same grievances you suffered when you were a daughter-in-law. I added, but, as daughters-in-law, I am different from you. You threw yourself into my arms, but I am your son who pursued me relentlessly. No wonder your son listened to me and broke your family's rules and went to the kitchen. This is the difference between you and me. This completely ignited Lee Kaiman's anger. She gritted her teeth in anger, pushed away the fruit snacks on the coffee table, and yelled at me, "Get out, get out. My Yang family does not welcome vicious women like you." Her words were exactly what I wanted, but I didn't turn around and leave. Instead, I smiled and said, "I'm sorry, it was your son who asked me to come back. Shouldn't you tell him?" Oh. She was roaring like a mad lion, without any elegance and grace she showed on the outside. Then, she rushed towards me and slapped me hard in the face with her knife-like hands. My face suddenly felt hot and painful, and my ears started buzzing. Yang Chen, who had heard the noise a long time ago, was already walking towards me. When he saw his own mother slapping me, he rushed over and shouted in a trembling voice, "Jing Shu." When he came to me, he pushed Lee Kaiman away, reached out his hands and carefully held my face, with a look of tenderness in his eyes, and asked me, "Does it hurt?" I said nothing, but just looked at him seriously. I saw my figure reflected in his entire pupil, saw his eyes turned red, and saw his face full of anxiety. He should still love me, right? But I raised my hand suddenly, and slapped him on the left cheek with a slap sound. A red mark immediately appeared on his face. Chapter 22. I promised not to have any contact with her. His face suddenly changed, and he looked at me with surprise, but he didn't make any other moves. He just pursed his lips and remained silent. Oh. Instead, Lee Kaiman next to him started screaming madly. She seemed to be extremely angry, her whole face was distorted, and she roared with bared teeth, "You bitch, you dare to hit my son, RR. I will tear you apart." She stepped forward and raised her hand. "That's enough." Yang growled angrily. Lee Kaiman was dumbfounded. Yang Chen stood in front of me, his anger dissipated in an instant, and he looked at me very gently, "Go upstairs first, the meal is ready, I'll call you down to eat." I met his gaze, tears rolling down my eyes. My heart was clearly filled with resentment, but now it was also filled with some sweetness. I turned my face away and lowered my head, "Okay." When I went upstairs, Lee Kaiman started to cry loudly. She said, "Do you still regard me as your mother? How many times have you disobeyed me for her? I carried you for 10 months and gave birth to you. I raised you to be the powerful CEO you are now, and this is how you treat me." She pointed at me on the stairs and said, "I'm telling you, you have to divorce her and make sure she never steps into this house again. Between me and her, you can only choose one. Either she or me." She began to threaten, "If you don't divorce him, I will jump off the building." Although all this was what I wanted, Lee Kaiman's words made me feel suffocated, let alone Yang Zhan. I looked at Yang Zhan. He stood there motionless, with his head slightly lowered, his hands hanging limply at his sides. The fingers of his left hand were stained with blood, which dripped from his fingertips onto the snow-white floor. My heart ached. It turned out that he cut his finger while cutting vegetables. He can't cook, and he once cut his finger while cooking for me, and there is still a scar on it. "Mom, why do you always like to threaten me with death since I was a child?" He spoke suddenly, his voice was low and a little weak. "You are the one who disobeys me. You were so obedient when you were little, why are you like this now? Especially since you met this woman, how many times have you rebelled against me?" Lee Kaiman accused in a sharp voice. Yang Chen clenched his fists, blood oozing from his fingers. He said with self-mockery, "Well, when I was a kid, if I didn't listen, you would lock me up in the basement." Of course I listened. After hearing this, Lee Kaiman snorted, "Anyway, I'm telling you, you have to divorce this woman. Otherwise, this family will never be at peace. One day I'll just jump down and die." After saying that, he left angrily. Yang looked up at me in the middle of the stairs, put his hands in his pockets, and smiled gently, "It's okay, you go up first, I'll go cook your favorite shredded pork with lettuce, shredded sea-bass soup with ginger, and fried shrimp with garlic moss." I said indifferently, "I have eaten it." After saying that, he went upstairs and entered the room. After closing the door, I saw the room filled with blooming spring orchids, with light brown and yellow flowers, petite and elegant plant shapes, and pure and subtle fragrance. This is my favorite, and its flower language is simple and elegant, youthful and energetic, and graceful and elegant. I have liked Chunlan since I was a child. I used to raise Chunlan with Yangjin. When I got married, I brought Chunlan here, but he threw it down and told me, I hate this kind of flower the most. Don't raise it anymore. I leaned my back against the door, slowly squatted down, buried my face in my knees, and couldn't help crying. Why was he so gentle and considerate when I decided to leave, making me think he still loved me? If you still love me, why have you been indifferent to me for a whole year? Why have you brought the woman who bullied me to stab me in the heart? After crying for a while, my eyes were sore and my head was dizzy. I opened the medicine box, picked up a band-aid and went downstairs to the kitchen. He was busy cutting vegetables, cooking, and adding seasonings. His hair was messy, his clothes were dirty, and he looked a bit disheveled. He was allergic to oil fumes and kept coughing. Even wearing a mask was of no use. His fingers started bleeding again halfway through the cooking process, so he rinsed them under the tap and continued cooking. After he had cooked the 3 dishes carelessly, he turned around and saw me standing at the kitchen door. He took off his mask and smiled at me. The meal is ready, go to the restaurant and wait for me. I said coldly, I forgot to tell you, I have already had dinner. He was stunned for a moment, and said in a pleading tone, can you eat a little more? You look so thin, eat more and gain some weight. I glanced at his finger and saw that it was bleeding again. I handed him the band-aid and said, it's bleeding again. Put it on. He looked down at his fingers and smiled, his voice carrying a hint of childish pride, see, you still care about me. He took a few steps closer to me and stretched out his finger in front of me, I don't know how to apply it, you help me. I saw a wound on his left middle finger, which was constantly bleeding. I stuffed a band-aid into his hand and said, you can put it on or not. Then in consideration of the slap you gave me, will you help me put it on? He moved closer with his handsome face, his eyes half smiled, and his tone was a little coquettish. I've gotten used to seeing his cold face over the past year, so I was a little stunned at this moment. It was as if we were back to the time before we got married, when he also loved to act like a spoiled child. Look, it's all swollen. He turned his face sideways to show me. I looked at his face. He had cold white skin and sensitive skin. When there was a little cold wind, the bloodshot on his face would be particularly obvious. At this moment, his skin was thin and there was a large red area. I pursed my lips, took the band-aid from his hand, and tore off the tape. He immediately stretched out his injured finger. His finger was unusually slender and white, and more beautiful than a girl's finger. I carefully put on the band-aid, and he suddenly grabbed my hand, tightly, as if he was reluctant to let go. He said, honey, are we moving out tomorrow? I've bought a house in your name, and it's all decorated according to your preferences. I admit that I still love him very much. When I found out that he was with Beaumeyer, I also knew that I could no longer love him. However, I still couldn't control my heart and I was still moved. He suddenly took out his cell phone, deleted and blocked Beaumeyer's phone number in front of me, and unfollowed her TikTok account. She can't compare to you, and I have never been ambiguous with her. The last time she called you in the middle of the night, it was because I went out for a drink and got drunk in the private room. She used my phone to call you. Then why were you so close to her? Why were you two in the same private room? He listened to my question, was silent for a few seconds, and then said, not anymore. I promise I won't have any contact with her. I asked him, Yangjin, do you have any unspeakable secrets? I was eager to know why and wanted to get the real answer from him, but he ignored my question and just hugged me tightly, saying in a gentle tone, I'm sorry, we will be fine in the future. I pushed him away forcefully and said coldly, Yangjin, let's get a divorce. We can each live a good life on our own. The phone fell out of his pocket and hit the floor with a loud thump. Just then the phone screen lit up and a WeChat message came. I quickly bent down to pick it up. But he took the lead in picking up the phone, opened it with the password, and clicked on the message on WeChat. The next second, his handsome face became gloomy and terrifying, his eyes were fixed on the WeChat message, and the fingers that had just been put on the band-aid were clenched tightly, and blood seeped through the tape, as if he was restraining his powerful anger. I snatched the phone away and saw a message on it, honey, are you asleep? I miss you every night. Chapter 23 Yangjin, are you sick? I got goosebumps when I read this sentence. The note above is Mr. Chen, which means Chen Ci. I have the habit of clearing the chat history, so there is no chat content above. I don't know why he sent this sentence at night. You didn't want to divorce me because of Bo Mayer, did you? You just couldn't bear the loneliness and felt that I hadn't touched you for a year, so you found a strange man outside. Now you are in a hurry to divorce me and live with this strange man. His dark eyes were cold as he stared at me, and every word he said was filled with humiliation. I clenched my phone tightly. I felt ashamed and angry at what he said. I was filled with anger and said, "Yeah, I don't know if you have a sexual dysfunction or you are a man. You haven't touched me for a year and can't give me sexual happiness. Why can't I find a man outside?" After hearing this, his eyes were burning with anger. The next second, he pinched my elbows with both hands, picked me up and put me on the island counter. I sat on the cold platform, looking at his pale and somewhat gloomy face, and shouted angrily, "Yang Zhan, what do you want to do?" He held my neck with one hand and my waist with the other, forcing me to look at him, with a wicked smile on his face. "I want to do what you always wanted to do." He leaned close to my ear, stretched out his hot and wet tongue, slowly slid it across my earlobe, and licked it gently. It felt soft and itchy, as if a weak electric current was flowing through my body, making me tremble all over. I was ashamed and angry. "You are sick." Next second, he actually bit my round and smooth earlobe as if punishing me and rubbed it with his teeth. I cried out in pain, and pressed my hands against his shoulders. I was breathing heavily, and I shouted in a low voice, "Yang Zhan, don't do this." But these few words seemed to make him even more in a bad mood. He clamped my hands behind my back with one hand, and squeezed my jaw with the other hand, asking dangerously, "Don't be like that. You can have fun when you go out for a few days. Tell me, did you do it with this wild man? To what extent did you do it?" I was shaking all over, a little scared, and explained truthfully, "I didn't do it with him, and we weren't that kind of relationship, we were just friends. I met him twice. The first time he helped me get to the hospital, and the second time was when I invited him to dinner yesterday. I don't know why he would send such a message. I swear." He looked at me, his anger lessened a little, but his eyes were filled with surging lust, as if my plea for mercy had aroused his interest. The next second, his hand touched my face and he murmured, "Wife, do you want to try it? Do I have any sexual dysfunction?" I panicked and yelled, "No." But he pushed my body down on the island counter, pressing his narrow and tense body on top of me, with his long limbs pressing on my legs. He also raised my hands above my head and fixed them, so that I couldn't move at all. I could clearly feel something rapidly expanding and tightening against my thigh. As his hot body pressed against me, my body also started to heat up, with sweat on my forehead and my breathing becoming rapid. Just as I was about to open my mouth to curse him, he kissed me hard. His scent filled my mouth and made my whole body tremble. I was a little dazed. This was the first time we kissed. In the past, I dreamed of being affectionate and romantic with him. I would be shy, nervous, and eager, but now I don't think about that anymore. I just feel disgusted and nauseated. I clenched my teeth tightly, but he pried them open roughly and kept entangled with my tongue. I felt a little suffocated, my brain was deprived of oxygen, and my whole body was dizzy. Shame, anger, helplessness, bitterness, all the emotions flooded my mind, and I bit his tongue desperately. He was obviously in pain. He left my lips and reached out to wipe his tongue. There was blood. "Why are you pretending to be reserved now? Have you forgotten how you used to wear all kinds of sexy lingerie and seduce me? I remember clearly how eager you looked." These words were like a slap in the face, making me feel ashamed and embarrassed. I sat up from the island counter, wiped my lips vigorously, and sneered, "Yes, I wanted to do it with you before, but now I don't want to at all, I just want a divorce. Since I chose to divorce, why should I let him touch me? Who knows if he has ever touched Pamia? Even if he hasn't, I still feel dirty. Then I'll use force." His expression was close to madness. I was scared, but also found it funny. "Yang Zhan, how many nights have I waited for you in the past? As you said, how many times have I worn sexy clothes to seduce you? But you didn't even touch me, it's like you are frigid. Now, I want a divorce, but you are interested in me instead." I stared at him with my dark eyes, and slowly raised my red lips. "Are you panicking?" I never spoke to him like this before, always speaking softly, gently and sweetly, but now I dare to say anything to him. After hearing this, his eyes became sinister and terrifying, and his hands were shaking with anger. I stood down from the counter and looked up at him fearlessly. Maybe if he slapped me, I would have given up completely. However, he just turned around and took the food out. Stop making trouble, come out to eat. You said you want to make trouble, so don't make trouble? I bent down to pick up my phone and followed him to the restaurant, where he went back and brought out another dish and the rice as well. Lee Kaiman also came at this time. When she saw her son busying around, she was so angry that her whole face was shaking. She looked at me as if she wanted to skin me alive on the spot. I sat in the right seat. This position used to belong to Lee Kaiman. Lee Kaiman was about to start cursing, but Yang Chen sat down to my right and picked some food for me. By the way, I almost forgot that after living in the Yang family for a year, I was not qualified to sit at the table for dinner. At most, I would sit at the table and eat leftovers after they finished eating. Originally there was only one rule in the Yang family: men were not allowed to go into the kitchen. Later, when Lee Kaiman became their hostess, she set another rule for me: the daughter-in-law could not sit at the table. Lee Kaiman sat to my lower left, gritting her teeth. I picked up the chopsticks and took a bite of the meat, then spit it out rudely, frowning. It's disgusting, is this fed to pigs? Lee Kaiman next to him was probably hungry and was chewing some lean meat. Lee Kaiman put down her chopsticks and glared at me. You are so rude because you have not received higher education. My son went to the kitchen to cook with good intentions. For all these years, I have been reluctant to let him do even a little bit of work. You can just tell him to do it, but what right do you have to say that the food is unpalatable? If you don't want to eat it, get out. Pop. I slammed my chopsticks on the table. Then I won't eat. Yang Chen saw this and stood up silently. What do you want to eat? I'll make it again. Lee Kaiman stood up suddenly, his voice was sharp. What are you doing? Yang Chen, have you been bewitched by this woman? With your status and position, why are you serving him? This woman is a slut, get her out now. I also stood up suddenly, and gracefully and smoothly threw the 3 plates of food and 3 bowls on the table to the ground. The clattering sounds were extremely harsh. Ah! Lee Kaiman screamed madly in anger. She didn't have the grace and elegance of a noble lady. Instead, she overturned the dining chair, pointed at me and said, Yang Jin, I can't stand it anymore. You must divorce this woman. Chapter 24, what is the difference between looking for a hostess and looking for you? She is my wife. I have the final say on whether to divorce or not. Yang Chen spoke in a low voice, his expression solemn and stern. Lee Kaiman was still somewhat afraid of him. After all, everything she enjoyed was given by this son, and she could only rely on this son for the rest of her life. Yang Chen is no longer under her strict and suffocating control as he was in his youth. Now he is wealthy, capable, deep and steady. Lee Kaiman trembled the corner of her lip and dared not say anything more. She just looked at me with more and more hatred. Maybe she had never thought that I would rebel one day, and she never thought that her son would suddenly defend me. I'm not hungry. I'm going back to my room. After saying this, I went upstairs to my room, looked at the colorful sexy clothes in the closet, picked up a pair of scissors and cut them all into pieces. Now I feel disgusted. Finally, I collapsed on the ground powerlessly. The bitterness deep in my heart permeated every layer of my skin, and even the air was filled with bitterness. Thinking of his deep kiss on me in the kitchen, and his protection of me in front of Lee Kaiman, I couldn't understand why he treated me so well when I chose to leave. I thought of Chen Ci's WeChat message, took out my phone, opened the dialog box, and replied, Mr. Chen, did you send it to the wrong person? If you didn't send it to the wrong person, the content you sent was inappropriate, wasn't it? The reply came immediately, sorry, I sent it to the wrong person, I sent it to my girlfriend. I was confused. Didn't Mr. Chen have a wife? How could he have a girlfriend? At this time, Yang Chen opened the door and came in. He glanced at the pieces of clothes on the ground without saying anything. Instead, he took off his coat and threw it on the sofa. As if habitually, he ordered, go and take out my pajamas and underwear. I'm going to take a shower. In the past, as soon as he entered the room, I would clean his clothes and hand them to him, and he would take them to the bathroom to take a shower. This time, I acted like I didn't hear it and stood up, holding my phone. He suddenly snatched my phone away, and when he saw the message on it, his face warmed up a lot, and he said, Mr. Chen, I had dinner with you yesterday. The secretary of the board of directors next to Li Yang, Chen Ci, right. Secretary to the board. I was quite surprised. It turned out to be the secretary to the board, but it could also be a friend and secretary. He asked again, "You said earlier that Chen Ci took you to the hospital. You knew him before? Why was he the one who took you to the hospital?" He was indeed a very sensitive and suspicious person, and I had nothing to hide, so I told him the truth. "I was knocked down the stairs by your mother's dog, and I called you, but you told me to go to the hospital by myself." "Mr. Yang, you have a vivid memory, right? Later, your phone was turned off, and I stumbled to the side of the road and happened to see his car. He is a good man and took me to the hospital, so I invited him to dinner later, and it just so happened that your uncle knew him and came to eat for free." He asked in confusion, "What is Chen Ci doing here for no reason?" I responded, "Even if he doesn't live here, can't he have friends living here?" He pondered for a few seconds and said, "That afternoon, Li Yang suddenly came to visit. Because my mother's Rottweiler barked at him a few times, he asked the bodyguard to kill it." He frowned. "Is it really such a coincidence?" I was shocked. I always thought the Rottweiler was killed by someone else, but I didn't expect it was him. Suddenly I remembered that the first time Li Yang sent me home, he said in the car, "That dog deserves to die." My mind is a little confused. Did he do it on purpose, or was it just a coincidence? But he didn't have to do it on purpose. Suddenly I felt very bitter. The dog that put me in the hospital was not killed by Yang Jin. Yang Chen had already entered the cloakroom, simply put away a set of pajamas, and went to the bathroom. I really wanted to run, but even if he found me half an hour later, he could still drive me back. After all, this was a villa area for the rich, and there were no taxes on the road. Unless I called a taxi online, it would take some time to get there. What's more, if I leave by myself, it will only anger him further. About 10 minutes later, I heard a ringing sound coming from the pocket of his coat on the sofa. I looked over and seemed to know who was calling, so I stepped forward and took out the phone to answer it. Sure enough, my hunch was right. "Yang Jin, why did you block me on WeChat? Did Jingshu ask you to block me? Is she suspicious again, afraid that I would snatch you away? Doesn't she have any confidence at all? Besides, I'm an artist of a subsidiary of your group. What's wrong with you having me as your friend?" Bo Meiyer's voice over there was as sharp and thin as ever. Just at this time, Yang Chen walked out of the bathroom, and it seemed that he had not started washing yet. I felt so overwhelmed with anger that I stared at Yang Chen and said to the phone, "Don't be so confident. I didn't delete you. Yang Chen deleted you on his own initiative just to coax me home." There is no sound from that end. I deliberately smiled at Yang Chen, and said in a soft and gentle voice, "Honey, are you done with your bath?" The voice on the other end rose a few notes and became even more piercing, so it turned out that I misunderstood. "Then Mrs. Yang, please live a good life with Mr. Yang and don't quarrel with him and make him unhappy, otherwise you will come out to drink with me again." I smiled and replied, "What couple doesn't quarrel? The more they quarrel, the more they love each other. If he goes out to drink, then he can find you. What's the difference between finding a hostess and finding you? It's better to find you because you don't want any money." Bo Meier was so angry that her voice broke, and her tone was full of uncontrollable anger. "Jing Shu, you have such a nasty mouth. I think if she didn't know Yang Zhan was next to her, she would probably have cursed at me." I smiled softly. "Aren't you not interested in my husband? Why are you so defensive?" The other end hung up the phone. I looked at my phone and felt happy. I remembered the last time she called me, she hung up before I could even curse back. This time, I finally got back at her. "You seem like a different person, covered in thorns." Yang Chen suddenly spoke. I raised my eyes to look at him. His clear black eyes were calm, not angry at all, but rather a little surprised. "Can it not change?" I threw away his phone and sat on the bed with a pale smile. Suddenly remembering what Bo Meier said, I asked, "Can you fire Bo Meier?" He paused and asked me, "Can you delete Chen Ci's WeChat and have no contact with Li Yang or anyone he knows?" I said angrily, "This is different. Chen Ci helped me, your uncle also helped me, did Bo Meier help you?" He said calmly, "The group is planning to enter the micro-short drama industry, and we need some big internet celebrities with a large number of fans to play the female lead. Bo Meier is a top internet celebrity, and her qualifications are very suitable in all aspects." I pinched my fingers and asked him again, "Does your group, as big as it is, need a female internet celebrity like her?" He remained silent. I said with extreme paranoia, "Yang Jin, what if I have to ask you to fire her? He turned and walked into the bathroom, leaving a sentence: "I'm not interested in her, but there's no need to quit." At that moment, my nails dug deep into my palms, blood was flowing out from between my fingers. What did it feel like? Destruction, anger, helplessness, close to madness. Her husband kept saying that he was not interested in the third party with obvious intentions, but he was reluctant to delete her. Only those who have experienced it will understand this feeling of madness. She clearly knew we were getting a divorce and clearly showed that she wanted to win me back, but the result? She even refused to delete Bo Mayer when I asked her to do so. Even if she didn't provoke me, even if she didn't bully me, even if she was really not interested in Yangjin, I just simply don't like her. Can't you fire her for me? I suddenly laughed out loud and became more determined to get a divorce. Chapter 25, Thinking about another man in your dream, right? Probably because of neurasthenia, I felt tired and really wanted to sleep, so I took some new bedding and put it on the sofa, and then fell into a deep sleep. Late at night I had a nightmare. In the dream I was back in high school. I was surrounded by teachers and students, mocked and humiliated. They also asked me who had sex with me. At this time, a boy came out and said loudly, "Her aborted child is mine. I am the one who had sex with her." I looked at the man and asked, "What are you talking about?" He acted like a hero saving a beautiful girl, and said to me affectionately, "I won't let you face this alone. I won't allow them to bully you." Because of what he said, everyone laughed at me and some even threw stones at me on the head. My head was bleeding and I cried and shouted for explanation. But no one listened at all. Their faces were distorted like corroded skeletons, and their eyes stared at me. I screamed his name over and over again, full of resentment: "Yangjin! Yangjin! Yangjin!" The scene changed, and he fell to the ground in a horrible state, covered in blood, dragging a broken leg, crawling towards me little by little. I suddenly woke up from my dream, soaked in cold sweat. Before my frightened heart could calm down, I saw a sinister and violent face right in front of me. The anger revealed in those eyes could almost ignite the air around them. I sat up, glanced at the bedding on the sofa, and explained calmly, "I just had a dream." He sneered, "You call this name so affectionately." The name I called out in my dream was Yangjin, which has the same pronunciation as his, but I couldn't tell him about this. I promised Ihan that I wouldn't tell anyone, and this had nothing to do with our relationship, so I never told him. Many times when I called out this name in my dreams, he thought I was calling him and would say lovingly, "Little cutie, you love me so much. You even dreamed of me." I always say in the most gentle tone, "Yes, I love you." He suddenly pinched my jaw with his hand, forced me to look at him, and asked me, "What's wrong? Why didn't you say you loved me like you did before? Why aren't you smiling?" I was angry and annoyed, so I pushed his hand away, because I didn't dream about you, and I didn't call your name. Suddenly, he stretched out his hands and grabbed my neck. His face was gloomy and terrifying, like a mad wolf, and he gnashed his teeth. "Say it again." The force was not very strong, but it was enough to make it difficult for me to breathe. I looked at him and suddenly felt chilled to the bone. The person who once said he loved me was now strangling me. I stared at him and said in a serious tone, "The person I have never dreamed of is not you." This sentence seemed to anger him even more, but I didn't expect that he didn't strangle me hard, but pushed me down on the bed, holding my hands tightly, staring at me. "You are so horny, so you think about other men in your dreams, right?" His words were extremely humiliating. I was furious and struggled hard, cursing, "Yangjin, you are a psychopath, a scumbag with a sick brain, let me go now." He snorted and laughed, with a strong mockery in his eyes. "I haven't quenched your thirst yet, what if you die of thirst?" He let me go and quickly took off his pajama shirt, revealing his firm and flexible chest. When I struggled to get up, he pressed his body on me again and lowered his head to kiss me hard on the lips. One hand pinched my wrists, and the other hand reached into my nightgown, caressing my thighs. My legs struggled. But he pressed my legs with his thighs, making me unable to move. My mouth was occupied by him and was ravaged fiercely, making it more difficult for me to breathe than if he had strangled me. He suddenly left my lips. I quickly took a deep breath and almost yelled, "Yangjin, you bastard, you!" My lips were blocked again, this time more fiercely. My young body trembled under him, but not because of lust, but because of disgust and aversion. So, regardless of everything, I bit his tongue hard. He finally let me go, stuck out his tongue, wiped it gently with the back of his hand, and looked at the blood. He was about to get furious, but he seemed to see my tears falling. He was stunned for a few seconds and then got up from me. I wiped my swollen lips vigorously, and shouted hoarsely, "Why did you refuse and humiliate me when I wanted to have sex with you before? Now that I want a divorce, you do this to me, are you a slut?" After cursing, my chest felt much better. He looked at me, with many emotions swirling in his eyes, including anger, forbearance, repression, self-mockery, pain, and finally turned into a sneer. Then he got out of bed, picked up his pajamas and put them on, sat quietly on the sofa, opened the drawer of the coffee table, and took out a box of cigarettes and a lighter. He skillfully shook out one, put it in his mouth, and lit it, and the flames bloomed brilliantly. He exhaled the first puff, then took another deep breath. The smoke slowly exhaled from his nose, and soon, the whole room was filled with the smell of nicotine. After finishing a cigarette, he went to the cloakroom to change his clothes. He didn't even look at me, but walked to the door and said, "You stay at home and don't go anywhere." After saying that, he went out and the door was slammed shut. I ran to the bathroom to take a shower and brush my teeth. When I came out, I vaguely heard footsteps outside the door. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't open no matter what I did. But I wasn't in a hurry because I had expected this. I just find it funny. He used to ignore me, but now that I want a divorce, he is being nice to me in every way and even locking me up to prevent me from running away. Men are mean by nature. When I woke up the next day, I heard Aunt Wang's voice outside the door, "Madam, are you awake? Can I come in?" I said, "Come in." I heard the sound of a key opening the door outside, and then the door was pushed open. Aunt Wang was holding a pot of beautifully blooming spring orchids in her arms. She said in a friendly manner, "Madam, this was sent by Mr. Yang early in the morning. He said that your favorite is spring orchids. Can I put it next to the window?" I looked at the pot of spring orchid, and my eyes were unconsciously covered with a layer of mist. I remembered him smashing the pot of spring orchid that we had carefully cultivated together and saying, "I tell you the truth, I hate this flower the most. It smells disgusting." Before I could say anything, she had already placed Chunlan next to the window and said with a smile, "It smells so good and looks so pretty, just as pretty as your wife." I really envy Mr. Yang for being so considerate and attentive to his wife. She meant no harm and was 1,000 times better than the previous Aunt Cow, so there was no need for me to show any displeasure and I just smiled back. Aunt Wang smiled at me and said more earnestly, "Before Mr. Yang left, he told me to take good care of you. Madam, what would you like to eat for breakfast this morning? I can make both Chinese and Western breakfasts. It just so happens that you can try my cooking skills. If there is anything not suitable, please point it out so that I can improve it." I said, "I'll do it myself." I had just taken a few steps towards the door when Aunt Wang quickly stopped me and said apologetically, "I'm so sorry. When Mr. Yang left, he repeatedly told me not to let you leave the room. You have to wait for him to come back and get his permission before you can come out." After saying that, she looked up at me cautiously. "He won't let me go out." "Of course, some people want me to go out." I said, "I want bird's nest soup and black truffle brie, that's all." This is Li Kaiman's favorite. Chapter 26, Mother Supports Her Son's Affair. Mother Wang walked out of the room and locked the door from the outside. I went to the bathroom to wash up, and when I came out I had been waiting for about half an hour when I heard heavy and hurried footsteps outside the door. I am very familiar with this footsteps, it's Li Kaiman. Soon the footsteps stopped at the door, and I heard her commanding tone, "Why don't you open the door quickly?" Then she continued, "Why? This is my own home, I can't go into any room I want. Besides, aren't you going to give breakfast to the woman inside? Aren't you going in?" The key just opened the door. Li Kaiman kicked the door open so hard that it hurt my ears. I looked towards the door and saw her holding a Rottweiler puppy in her arms, and next to her was Wang's mother, who was serving bird's nest soup and black truffle brie cheese. "What the hell are you? You want bird's nest soup and black truffle brie? Is your mouth worthy of that?" Li Kaiman walked in a few steps, raised her eyebrows, and stared at me with eyes as sharp as needles. Aunt Wang followed beside them, not daring to speak. Before I could say anything, Li Kaiman bent down, put the Rottweiler puppy on the ground, and ordered Wang Mar, "Give it to my baby. It hasn't had breakfast yet." The Rottweiler puppy put its front paws on Wang Mar's legs, opened its mouth and made a barking sound. Mother Wang gave me an awkward look. Li Kaiman roared, "Are you deaf? Antoine was startled and quickly squatted down to put the bird's nest soup and black truffle brie cheese on the ground. The Rottweiler puppy began to eat voraciously as if he had been craving for 800 years. Lee Kaiman's mouth curled up in satisfaction. I didn't feel angry at all. I looked at the Rottweiler puppy with a smile and said, I heard that your previous beast was killed. I had a little to do with its death. To express my apology, I specially asked Antoine to make bird's nest soup and black truffle brie cheese for your new beast early in the morning. I don't know what it likes to eat, but I thought that since you are its owner, you must have the same taste. I didn't expect that we actually have the same taste. You really deserve to be my baby. When she heard this, her face changed drastically and she pointed to the door. Get out. Didn't you keep saying you wanted a divorce? How dare you stay at home? Yang Zhan is not at home, get out as far away as you can. Seeing that I didn't move, she rushed in madly and started smashing things, yelling, get out of here now, and don't even think about being my daughter-in-law in your life. Do you deserve it? I deliberately moved closer to the window to block the pot of spring orchid. Seeing me protecting the orchid, she pulled me away, picked it up and slammed it to the ground, then crushed the orchid with her feet, scaring the Rottweiler puppy so much that it started howling. Antoine beside her had a look of heartache on her face. I looked at Chunlan, who was smashed to pieces on the ground, with a face full of fear, and said weakly, but if you drive me away, Yang Zhan will be angry. After hearing this, Wang Ma hurriedly said, yes, before the master left, he always told me to keep a close eye on their wife and not let her leave the room. Pop. Li Kaiman slapped Wang Ma in the face with her backhand, frowning and glaring, do you have the right to speak? Mother Wang covered her face and took a few steps back, feeling very aggrieved. Li Kaiman cast her gaze on me again, do you really think my son takes you seriously? I'm his mother. Besides, have you forgotten that he didn't bother to talk to you this year? After that, she crossed her arms proudly and said, you are not as good as Yair at all, from birth to family background to upbringing, you are not as good as her in every aspect. Even if you have nouveau-riche adoptive parents, you are still far inferior to them. What's more, your nouveau-riche adoptive parents don't take you seriously. I know that the Yaya she mentioned is Bo Meyer. This Bo Meyer is really capable. She can deal with someone like Li Kaiman who is selfish, sharp-tongued, and despises the poor and loves the rich. Their mother supports her son's affair with a mistress and even praises her to the skies. I laughed coldly, it's because the upper beam is crooked that the lower beams are crooked. Li Kaiman rushed over and raised his hand to hit me. I raised my face and stared at her viciously, you try to hit me. If you slap me once, I will slap your son 10 times. You saw it yesterday. Your son was willing to be beaten. She pulled her hand back and gnashed her teeth in hatred for me. Yang Zhan is the apple of her eye, and she has a strong possessiveness towards him. If I beat her, it would at most make her angry, but if I beat Yang Zhan, she would not only be angry but also heartbroken, and she would go crazy and collapse. I saw that she didn't dare to do anything, so I smiled at her. She took a few deep breaths, and with a strong look of disgust towards me on her face, she began to slander me with words, look at how shabby you are, and how cowardly you look. When I think of how you have been fawning over me and Yang Zhan over the past year, I feel that you are worse than a nanny at home. You are lowly at heart. Antoine next to her secretly looked up and took a look, looking a little unhappy. Li Kaiman snorted and continued, how can you be worthy of Yang Zhan? Get out of here now. I listened to the bad words around me, but I didn't feel much upset. After all, I was used to it and had immunity to it. I even thought that I was so pitiful before. Why? Are you reluctant to give up this luxurious room? Are you reluctant to give up your status as a wealthy lady? Li Kaiman sneered loudly again. I wasn't angry, but I looked aggrieved and scared, and said with a sob, okay, I'll go. Antoine called me, madam. I smiled at her faintly, you saw it too, my mother-in-law chased me away. If I didn't leave, I was afraid she would beat me too. Mother Wang looked at me with heartache. I looked back at the smashed flowerpots and trampled orchids on the ground. I felt sad but also relieved. I strode away. Just as I walked downstairs, Li Kaiman picked up her phone and called, hey, Yair, are you free? Come to your aunt's house for dinner. Yang Chan. Yang Chan will definitely go home for lunch at noon. Shall I send a driver to pick you up? Har har, what do you like to eat? Tell auntie, and I'll make it for you myself. She said it on purpose for me to hear. However, when a mother-in-law diligently pleases the mistress and bullies the original wife, her values are really shattered. I'm glad that I came to my senses and chose to leave this home. Even if Yang Chen still loved me, even if he hadn't cheated on me, as long as this mother-in-law existed, I would die of depression sooner or later. Between a depressed and painful life and a sunny and happy life, I think people who love themselves will choose the latter. It's good to leave indifferently and forget peacefully. After leaving the villa area, I called a taxi online. But before I got to the piano store, the taxi broke down on the road. Thinking that it was only about 10 minutes away, I walked to work. When I was crossing the green light, a luxury car ignored the green light and accelerated straight towards me. Instinctively, I dodged quickly and accidentally fell to the ground. However, the luxury car rushed to a few meters in front of me and stopped, then ignored traffic regulations and went back. The car window rolled down, revealing a fierce-looking face, who opened his mouth and yelled at me, "Are you blind?" The next second, his greasy, lifeless eyes looked at me and he whistled at me, "Beauty, are you okay? Where did you fall and hurt? How about getting in the car and I can rub it for you?" Chapter 27, Beautiful Girl, So Attractive. My ankle was sprained, and I stood up with difficulty, saying in disgust, "Don't you know anything about traffic rules?" He chuckled, looking superior. "What are traffic rules? I can drive my car however I want." After that, he honked the horn a few more times. "Beauty, you are so attractive, can we be friends after a fight?" I ignored him, took out my cell phone and called the police. I don't know what he cursed, but he drove past me, staring at me with his bulging eyes, giving me a feeling of ferocity and brutality. The police came and I told them the truth and then hurried to work. After all, there were cameras on top. After arriving at the music store, Meng Liwen saw that I was injured and asked me what happened. I smiled faintly. On the way to work, I was crossing the traffic light and was almost hit by a car that ran the red light. I sprained my foot when I tried to avoid it. Meng Liwen said, "Is the driver crazy?" Fortunately, nothing happened. "Why didn't you take the bus to work?" I said, "The taxi I took broke down in the middle of the trip. I saw that the piano store was not far away, so I walked." Miao Ning, who was standing by, came over and asked, "Jing Shu, didn't you marry into a very wealthy family? I've met your husband twice. He's wearing designer clothes. Hua Jiao calculated that he's worth at least 1 million. Didn't he buy you a car? Even if he didn't send you to work, did he?" She pointed at Hua Jiao and said, "Hua Jiao's husband is just a white-collar worker, but he sends Hua Jiao to work every day. They are so loving." Hua Jiao winked at Miao Ning, signaling her not to say anything. Miao Ning pretended not to hear and continued, "Tell us the truth. You suddenly came to work again. Are you having a hard time at your husband's house? Does your husband dislike you for staying at home every day and doing nothing and not making any money?" She patted my shoulder comfortingly and said, "Hey, ordinary people like us, instead of marrying into a wealthy family at all costs, suffering all kinds of grievances and being unwelcome, it is better for us to find a man who is similar to us and marry him, and live a stable life. Don't force your way into a wealthy family that doesn't suit you. You'll end up with an unhappy marriage and suffer for the rest of your life. I'm different. I never dream of marrying into a wealthy family to change my fate. I'm down to earth." After hearing this, Meng Liwen scolded, "Look how jealous you are. How do you know that people don't have a good life? Taking a taxi or walking to work is not good. Do you think everyone likes to show off? Besides, I think Jing Shu deserves to marry into a wealthy family. Not to mention that she is a senior tuner with superb skills, she also has a celebrity face, prettier than many celebrities, so it is only natural for her to marry into a wealthy family." Miao Ning looked embarrassed when he heard the store manager say this to him. I smiled slightly and said, "Have you forgotten the time you hooked up with my husband? The rude-looking fairy." Miao Ning has a very ordinary appearance, but she is quite pretty after putting on makeup. It is with this pretty appearance that she has always wanted to hook up with a tall, rich and handsome man. When I was dating Yang Chen, we were very low-key. Firstly, his mother didn't allow it, secondly, I am an introvert, and thirdly, Yang Chen was at a rising stage in the group company. One time he dropped me off at work and parked the car far away. Miao Ning saw me and I said casually, "He is my friend." Miao Ning couldn't help but stepped forward, flirting, and said confidently, "Handsome guy, do you need a beautiful girlfriend?" As a result, Yang Chen hugged me directly, not even looking at her, and mocked me, "Baby, why do some impolite-looking women always think they are fairies?" After being confronted by Meng Liwen and I, Miao Ning returned to her front desk job with resentment, and whispered to a new colleague, "Look at her, she married into a wealthy family with her face, but in the end she still has to work and get paid like us." Wang Dehai was going to attend classes at the piano training school under the headquarters company. He said he was not feeling well and actually asked me to take his place. I hurriedly said, "Teacher Wang, how can I do this?" Since the last time, his attitude towards me has become much better. He laughed and said, "You can definitely do it. The fact that you were able to tune up that old piano last time is enough to prove your ability. I am really impressed by you. I have 2 lessons. I'll give you a call and you can help me teach them." He was too enthusiastic, and he said he was not feeling well, so I had no choice but to go. During the 2 classes, in addition to teaching some of the subjects required by Teacher Wang's course, I also answered questions they raised, some difficult, some simple, and some challenging. I answered all the questions and also performed practical tuning. There were 50 or 60 students, all young people who loved piano. Some were older than me, and some were younger. They looked down on me when they saw me, but later they were convinced by me. It was already afternoon when we returned to the piano store. Meng Liwen took a break and went home to cook, and she also brought me a portion. Although the taste was ordinary, I ate it all and was very grateful. I said, "Thank you." Meng Liwen smoothed her short hair and said with a smile, "No need to thank me. I want to thank you for coming to work in my piano store. You know, I am under a lot of pressure as a store manager, so I need a great tuner like you." Actually, I didn't have much contact with her. After I got married and resigned from my job, I had no contact at all. I only left her a cell phone number. She is generous, righteous, and enthusiastic. Maybe it's because of her short buzz cut that she looks like a man and has an ordinary appearance. However, her facial features are actually very pretty. Meng Liwen said to me, "I want to tell you something. I don't know if I did the right thing. I recently found that my boyfriend had added a woman to his phone and was very attentive to her. So I secretly sent a message to her." Just then, Miao Ning said that a customer service representative called and asked for a piano tuner to come to his home to tune the piano. Meng Liwen let me go. Before leaving, Meng Liwen said, "It's already 3 o'clock. The customer service home is quite far away, and it's not easy to get a taxi there. It will probably be very late after the adjustment. Call your husband and ask him to pick you up." I held the tuning tools and smiled faintly. "It's okay, I remember there is a bus over there." Meng Liwen asked me seriously, "Jing Shu, did you have a fight with your husband?" I didn't hide it, he and I are in the process of divorcing. After hearing this, she looked at me worriedly, but didn't ask any more questions. She said, "Then call me after you're done, and I'll pick you up." I refused and said, "No, it's okay, just go on a date with your partner after get off work." After going to the customer service office to make adjustments and taking the last bus home, it was already 8:30. I was very tired but very fulfilled. Piano tuning relies on the human ears and hands, and of course it takes physical energy, but tuning an out-of-tune piano to the correct pitch is a very wonderful thing.